Good morning, CPAG. I am so excited to be with you on this Friday. It was foggy where I came from, but it's sunny here. So I'm excited to be in Sacramento with all of you. Seeing that most CPAG members are now present, Nancy, will you please call a roll to establish a quorum?
Absolutely. Good morning, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and begin the roll call. Chair Melanie Green,
Present.
Judy Flores,
Here.
Ronald Anaya,
Present.
Mia Cooper, Roddy Bunchoy, Babatunde Ilori,
Here.
Gabriela Tavitian,
Present.
Amy Nguyen Hernandez,
Here.
Todd Collins, Kelsey Crossan,
Here.
Samara Palco,
Present.
Angela Pasquale,
Here.
Matt Patterson,
Present.
Joshua Salas,
Present.
Charlotte Vega.
Here.
Thank you.
All right, we have a quorum. Thank you so much. I hereby call the February 2024 meeting of the California Practitioners Advisory Group to order at 9:03. And I'd like to start by saluting the flag. So everyone take a stand, please. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you so much. We have the pleasure to start our day with swearing in our 4 new CPAG members. So I will administer the oath of office to you one by one. You should have a copy of the oath, and then I will also have it. I'll read it to you one by line. I'll have each person come over here, and I'll have a constitution. You'll put your right hand. We'll start with Angela. I state your name, do solemnly swear
I, Angela Pasquale, do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution of the United States
that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California,
and the Constitution of the State of California,
that I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation
that I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation
or purpose of evasion,
or purpose of evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties upon which I am about to enter.
and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties upon which I am about to enter.
Thank you and
Thank you.
congratulations.
Thank you.
Now I would like to welcome Matt Patterson. Good morning. There you go, Matt. And I'll read each part and then you repeat after me. I state your name, do solemnly swear
I, Matthew Patterson, do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution of the United States
that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California,
and the Constitution of the State of California,
that I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion,
that I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties upon which I am about to enter.
and I will well and faithfully discharge the duties upon which I am about to enter.
Thank you and congratulations.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Matt. Okay, next we'll have Joshua. Josh? I have a son named Josh, so that's why I'm always conscious. You tell me. So you don't touch Josh? Josh, okay. Josh. All right. So I'll read it each line and then you repeat. I state your name, do solemnly swear
I, Joshua Solis, do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution of the United States
that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California,
and the Constitution of the State of California,
that I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion,
that I will take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties upon which I am about to enter.
and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties upon which I am about to enter.
Thank you and congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay, now Charlotte. So I'll read each line and you repeat. Start from the beginning, not the end. I state your name, do solemnly swear
I, Charlotte Vega, do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution of the United States
that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California,
and the Constitution of the State of California,
that I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion,
that I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties upon which I am about to enter.
and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties upon which I'm about to enter.
Thank you and congratulations. Let's welcome our 4 new CPAG members. And if it's okay with CPAG, I'd like to give them a minute each just to introduce themselves. I know we got to see them take the oath, but maybe just a little bit more about yourself. We have a big agenda item, but still I'd love to, if each person got to take a minute and share your name and maybe what your role is. Let's start with Angela.
Hello, I'm Angela Pasquale. I currently teach 7th and 8th grade, Stockton Unified School District. I have a weird split. I teach 7th grade math, 7th and 8th social studies, and I teach an AVID elective. I also work with Teachers College of San Joaquin, working with our new educators.
Thank you so much, Angela. Matt?
Good morning. Good to be here with everybody. I'm Matt Patterson, and I serve as the Director of Student Services for Visions and Education Charter School. In that role, I support mental health and wellness programming, curriculum design and development, LCAP development, and many other duties as assigned. My favorite job, day job, is being a dad of 5. Good to be here.
Thank you. Josh?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Josh. I am a 12th grade special education teacher down in Los Angeles. I work for a charter school called Alliance Renee and Meyer Luskin Academy. I just say Luskin for short. But pretty much working with my students in English, government, and econ. That's where I usually support them. I also work on our school site council as well as a chair, and even support our ASB. So I wear a lot of hats in my day-to-day. So.
Thank you so much, Josh. Charlotte?
Good morning, everybody. My name is Charlotte Vega. I'm an assistant principal in the Corona Norco Unified School District. I'm at Centennial High School, and I support our English Learner Program, our Advanced Placement and International Baccalaureate programs, and School Site Council, many of the hats that we wear as assistant principals. I'm also a parent, and my youngest son is a senior in high school.
Thank you so much, Charlotte. Welcome new members to CPAG. We're excited to have you. My name is Melanie Green, and I'm excited to be your host today for CPAG. With that, I also want to give a sincere thanks to Bootsy Battle Holt, Sheilanine Cruz Gonzalez, Tarina Small, Diane Grotjohn, and Janelle Woodward, whose terms on CPAG finished at the end of 2022. Babatunde and I were talking before the meeting about how we appreciate every CPAG member's perspective. And so it's bittersweet when folks term out on CPAG. I'm like, man, I'm not going to be able to talk to Diane today. I'm not going to be able to hear her perspective. But what's awesome about CPAG is we also get to bring a new perspective. So excited to have you on the team. We are so thankful for the folks whose terms have ended. Appreciate each and every one of them, from our time when we were on Zoom meetings and, of course, to our time we were together here at CPAG. With that, I also just want to welcome all of our CDE and state board staff, and we have board member Cynthia Glover-Woods, who will be joining us shortly. And I want to make sure that you know that our next meeting is Friday, June 14th. Make sure you have that on on your calendars. And we will take up item 2 out of order to approve the minutes from August 2023. Before that, we'll have public input, public comment. It can be provided in person or by phone. Members of the public wishing to call in for public comment should view the live stream of the meeting to know at what time the public comment will occur for each item. Public comment can be provided during the meeting by dialing the phone number and access code listed on the screen during each item. The operator will notify callers when it's their turn to provide public comment. Public comment will be limited to 1 minute. Please turn down the speaker volume of your computers if you're following the live webcast to avoid an echoing effect. So right now, it's public comment for item 2, which is approval of the minutes. CPAG members, you'll probably remember that you're provided the link to the draft minutes that are posted on the CPAG website. If anyone needs any time to review, you can use a minute now. You'll see on the slide, we have our phone number.
There's no public comments.
No public comment at this time. Okay. Is there anyone in the room who wishes to provide public comment? Great. Any discussion on this item? Okay, do I have a motion to approve the minutes from our last CPAG?
So moved.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Nancy, can you please call the roll?
Melanie Green,
Aye.
Judy Flores,
Aye.
Ronald Anaya,
Aye.
Mia Cooper, Rodi Bunchoy,
Aye.
Babatunde Ilori,
Aye.
Gabriela Tavitian,
Aye.
Amy Nguyen Hernandez,
Aye.
Todd Collins, Kelsey Crossan,
Aye.
Samara Palco,
Aye.
Angela Pasquale,
Aye.
Matt Patterson, Joshua Salas,
Aye.
Charlotte Vega.
Aye.
All right, motion carries.
Thank you so much. We will now transition to item 1, which is our main item. Item 1 is an information item related to California's state and federal accountability system. Review of the 2023 California School Dashboard and the 2024 Accountability Work Plan. We have some incredible CDE staff here, which will present the item. We have Cindy and Kimberly of the Analysis, Measurement, Accountability, and Reporting Division at CDE. Cindy, whenever you are ready, take it away.
Thank you, Melanie. Cindy Kazanis again with the Analysis, Measurement, and Accountability Reporting Division. Welcome to the new members. Welcome to the familiar faces that have been here before. And thank you for coming in person. We really value your input. You serve as actually a requirement under federal law to exist. So the Committee of Practitioners is something that the Every Student Succeeds Act, or ESEA, requires. And so you actually not only play sort of a federal requirement for us, but you also are designed by the makeup of your group to represent certain educational partners. And so we look forward to you bringing those ideas forward, and please ask questions. This is meant to be somewhat of a conversation. But to get started today, we will go through briefly the results from the 2023 school year, which was really our first full return for the dashboard. And then you're going to hear a bit about the accountability work plan. And we've already started taking that out to the field as recently as yesterday with a large science group. And so we do have actually some feedback to share with you already on the work plan. So without further ado, let me move into the slides and since there's not a large audience, again, and this is your only item, please, if you have a question, just raise your hand or just, I'll defer to Melanie on how she wants to handle that. But I think we can be somewhat informal today, especially on clarifying questions. So just to ground us, again, especially for those that are new and haven't heard our spiel before, our spiel, the purpose of the dashboard is really to allow our parents and our educators a place that is easy to read, that is meaningful to learn about their districts and their schools' progress, as well as student group progress. So the intent is that a wide variety of audiences can engage with the data to help with the planning process. The LCAP process has just started in many districts, and so that is supposed to be all based on the results that just were reported out on the California School Dashboard. So that is the intended purpose of the system. You're going to hear another term sometimes when we talk about things, which is DataQuest, and DataQuest is a web reporting portal that the department hosts, but it doesn't have the values that we or measurement that we have on the dashboard. So the dashboard actually ascribes a value through color. So we're going to hear about the colors today, and then how well schools and districts and student groups have done over time. So again, for those of you that may be new, and we have some different graphics on the dashboard. And in 2022, the department was prohibited from looking at the prior year data by state law. And that was in part, I think the intent was to really have the focus be on that 1 year of post-pandemic data. So giving our schools and our districts a fresh start. So it was very intentional by the legislature that we only had 1 year of data. And because we were not able to create a color in 2022, we did a very intentional thing in creating a graphic that was unique to status only. So the graphic that you see on the left-hand side with like the cell phone bars is our status only graphic. And the only indicator for 2023 that is still using that is our college career indicator. And that's because our college career indicator, one of the main premises of that is looking at our juniors in the prior year that took the state assessment. And because the prior year, those juniors didn't have, there was flexibility at the local level, we don't have a statewide sample of all schools and district. So college career indicator will pick up in 2024 with a color, but everything else you see on the dashboard for 2023 looks like the dashboard or that gauge that you see on the right-hand side with the arrow pointing at the green color. So in terms of how we did as a state, we, in chronic absenteeism, you're going to see amazing, everybody ended up in the yellow, but we're going to go through each of these one by one. For suspension rate, we're at an orange, English learner progress at a yellow, graduation rate at an orange, and again, our college career indicator is only looking at status, which was a medium, and then for both of our state assessments at an orange. So the state has room to grow. Obviously, we're not looking at a green for any of these indicators overall, but we're going to talk about some bright spots among the data as we go through this as well. So in terms of chronic absenteeism, it's always a helpful, I think, reminder that we are looking at grades K through 8, and that is driven by the Every Student Succeeds Act state plan for California, because we need to balance our indicators for our school types. So the equivalent indicator in our state plan is graduation rate for high schools. That said, we absolutely report on high school data for chronic absenteeism. It matters. We want to make sure that our high schoolers are attending school and they're getting an opportunity to learn. We just got a question yesterday about why do we have to report it on the SARC? And I'm like, because it's important information. Like you don't want to leave these students behind. So all that to say, chronic absenteeism was the major focus in 2022. It continued to be a major focus in 2023. And because of that, we were able to get out our DataQuest data early, and we saw that we had a nice decrease of 5 percentage points from the prior year. So we're Again, still have room to grow at 24.3% of our students being chronically absent, which is well above pandemic levels. But the decline of 5.7 for the K through 8 grades statewide is important. And you will see this when you hear from my colleague talk about schools and charter schools and districts and county offices who are identified for differentiated assistance. And then we also see it reflected in our school identification or eligibility under the Every Student Succeeds Act state plan. So this indicator has this distribution of every single student group at the state level being in yellow, which we've never seen before. So I don't think we will see this again. But Kimberly has brought up a good point in a prior session that I wanted to say it out loud. Yellow has many shades of yellow. So we see from 11% chronically absent all the way into I think it's the 30s. And so the span of these colors are unique to every single indicator. So for that reason, we always encourage the schools, a district, if you're a parent group, that you dig into the data, that you actually select where it says view more details at the bottom of that baseball card to learn more, because you'll be able to see the disparities or the vast differences for each of the student groups that are listed. And of course, California, I feel like probably, I haven't looked at the numbers recently, but for 13 student groups, we're probably one of the larger number of student groups that are out there compared to other states, where they tend to do super groups. They'll actually combine certain student groups so they get a larger end size. And of course, we have the luxury of having a lot of students, so that is one of the reasons. But we also have a very active educator stakeholder group who has supported and pushed for homeless students to be a student group and foster youth to be a student group, as an example. And then you're going to hear in just a little bit, not to be a spoiler alert, but long-term English learners will be coming on in 2024. For suspension rate, this is one of our long-standing data points that we've been reporting on, disaggregated on DataQuest actually for over a decade. So for suspension rate, if you were to look at, again, those bands of how these cut points work out for each of the colors, they're much tighter. So if you shift a half a percentage point, you actually will most likely shift colors. Whereas in chronic absenteeism, I mentioned, you have a much wider span of opportunity to stay within a color. So for that reason, we see, again, a much wider distribution at the bottom in terms of our student groups. So I'm looking at the equity report. Starting at the far left is 2 student groups in the red, 8 in the orange, 1 in the yellow, and then 2 in the green. So really, there is a lot to unpack here. And that's why, again, we talk about viewing more details, digging into the student group data is really important. But with that said, as a state, we have maintained under that 4% for a number of years. So if we think about all students, we are not, we are a very minor increase of 0.4%, but there are student groups that do have much larger numbers, upwards of 10% of students suspended. And so that's, again, why it's we're looking to view more details and dig into those student groups who consistently have been suspended potentially more often than other student groups. It's also important to point out, because we get this question on occasion still, if a student has been suspended at one school, moves to a different school, and moves to another school, those suspensions do not follow that student. It stays at that school. If that student was within that district, it would aggregate up to the district. But we're just looking to see for students that have been suspended once. And that is equivalent to what we're looking at as a full day as well, because sometimes students, especially in the middle school grades, would have not a full day suspension. Our English Learner Progress Indicator, we are thrilled to have back on the dashboard with a color for the first time in years, actually pre-pandemic. And that's partly due to the fact that we've changed assessments since we first started the accountability system. We moved from the CELT to the LPAC, the English language proficiency assessment for California. And this is the first year that we've been able to include in the alternate assessment. So for those of you that sat through this meeting last February, you may recall, like this was something that we were really focused on for 2023, and we're delighted to have a return with a full color. That said, we still are under the 50% margin, our mark of our students who are designated as English learners making progress. So we're at 48.7%, with a slight decrease in maintaining from the prior year. The English Learner Progress Indicator also brings into consideration participation rate. And of course, for our students who are English learners, it's a requirement. They're supposed to take this assessment every year because we want to make sure that we're seeing growth, and when there is enough growth with other factors involved, students may get reclassified. And so this indicator, while we're not able to include our reclassified students as we had first intended for this indicator, it does show and is meant to show growth and programs that are strong in this area over time. Our graduation rate indicator is what it says, except that we are able to also include fifth-year graduates. So if you are thinking about, well, my graduation rate from my school was, you name it, 86%, why is mine a little increased, or why do I see something different? And typically when we look at graduation rates and we hear them reported out in the news, it's usually just the four-year graduation rate. But in accountability, we're able to include multiple students who have been supported to continue their trajectory so that they can get a full diploma. And so what you see here in this indicator is 4- and 5-year graduation rates. Now, for those of you that are involved in alternative schools, or like Melanie, and have an affinity towards our students who are in alternative settings, a prior look at graduation rate included what we called a 1-year graduation rate for our dashboard alternative school status schools, or DAS schools. And like other things on the dashboard that have had to change, that had to change because the U.S. Department of Education considered that that was not in line or in compliance with the intent of the federal law of ESSA. So while that is removed, we still report out on it through an additional report, and we'll be getting that data out later this spring. So as a whole, I should also mention that during COVID, the legislature also passed some flexibilities for schools and districts to take advantage of, so that students could only have to meet the state graduation minimum requirements to receive a high school diploma. And those flexibilities expired. And so we do see a slight decline, and you can see here it's a 1% decline for the dashboard in that rate. And we do believe it is in part due to some of those flexibilities no longer being applied. But I think that that'll even out for future years. And we've had this gradual trajectory of increasing graduation rates over the past several years. The College Career Indicator, as I mentioned, is something that is we look at just for status, and so you don't see that what was the prior year. We only show you the current year. So we had 43.9% that were prepared. If you look at the equity report, while no student groups are in the very low, we do have most of our student groups, in the low, and then medium and high. And of course, the College Career Indicator is not about individual student preparedness. The preparedness is how a school is supporting students to become prepared for college or a career. And so sometimes we get asked, do they get something on their diploma that shows that they're prepared under this indicator? And no, it's not a student level indicator. It is an indicator that is aggregated and is a reflection of supports that a school and a district are giving to those students. And so the basis of the indicator is about a rigorous, broad course of study. And that is something that I know we're going to talk a little bit about more when we talk about our accountability plan for 2024. And then English language arts and mathematics, obviously the statewide assessments came out this past year as in prior years, well before the dashboard in October, and we do see a bit of a maintaining for both, with obviously room to grow, that being that most of our student groups are either in the red or the orange. The indicator, similar to the English learner, the LP is based not only just on the summative assessments, but also alternative assessments, which is really important that we're inclusive on both of these metrics. And the component that is used, or the calculation that is used, is called distance from standard. And why that's important is you're going to hear a little bit more about this as we start talking about science more on the dashboard. The indicator also, and this is a requirement of federal law under the Every Student Succeeds Act, requires that all student groups, schools, and districts meet a participation rate of 95%. And if the participation rate is not met for any of those metrics, that we apply a penalty. So it's not something the department gets to, has made up on its own. It's something that actually came to a prior CPAG. It was one that we had to actually go through an iteration because the original version, the U.S. Department of Education, found us to be out of compliance as well. They didn't like our calculation. They thought it was a little too lax. And so what you see today is a penalty that has been put together over the last couple of years. But on the bright side, we see most of our schools and districts with absolutely meeting that participation rate of 95% and not having any penalty applied. So there has been, I think, a good effort to get the word out. Why it's important that we see all students have the ability to take the assessment, to be shown in the data and not be excluded from the data, so that we can meet all our students' needs and where they're at. In terms of our mathematics indicator, you see slightly less, you see the points below standard a bit higher, so students have done a little bit less well on the mathematics indicator compared to the English language art indicator, but the indicator works the same as our English language arts indicator in the calculation. And so with that, Melanie, before I turn it over to my colleague, if I can pause for any questions.
Incredible comprehensive overview, Cindy. I mean, this is years in the making, and you're able to summarize each piece. Of course, incredible. So appreciate that. Any questions about the pieces of information that Cindy just presented? All right, great. Thank you so much. Oh, yeah, go ahead, Kelsey.
I just had a quick question. Is there, if you look up a school or district's performance in ELA or math, can you see that when a penalty has been applied for participation?
Yeah, so the penalty that is applied for the participation rate is actually accessible through our additional reports. So when you're on the dashboard screen, you'll start to see a hover of a top scrolling bar. I can't. There's probably a better name for it. I'm not figuring it out right now. But it says View Additional Reports, and there is one that is specific to participation rate. So I'm happy to show you if we have time. I can show the whole group if that's of interest. But yes, that is absolutely available. It's available as a downloadable file as well. So it's something that schools and districts do look at. It does not show up, I should say, it does not show up on the CAS website. So this is something that is unique to accountability and accountability statute. It is not the penalty, and how the participation rate is calculated is done through accountability because we have specific rules around continuous enrollment. So that is, just as an aside, if you're looking for it on CASP, or why don't we see this on CASP, or we're at 95% on CASP, but we're not on this one, that is why. The other piece that I forgot to mention is we do send students who are receiving, students with disabilities who are receiving services from another district or school through like an MOU, traditionally that's done at a county level. Those students' scores are all sent back to that district. And because that district is ultimately responsible for the education of that student, sometimes that is where you'll also see some differences on what you'd see on the CAS website. All right, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Justin Lang, to talk through the next couple slides.
Thank you, Cindy. Thank you, CPAG, for having it. And I'm going to be talking about two items on this long agenda item. differentiated assistance and under LCFF, and CSI, ATSI under ESSA. And last time I talked to you guys, the CPAG, I told you how excited I was to talk about LP stuff, English learner, because I love English learners, but I also love differentiated assistance and ESSA. I know that sounds weird, but you should. I have a great team for LCFF. I work with Vina Nambiar, and I work with Mark Riera. As a team, we're the ones that developed this list. And then for ESSA, Sayu and Vina Nambiar as well, work together for that. You should hear our conversations. We get so excited about the small details, and mostly because we know that our goal is to get the assistance and the support needed for those districts, county offices of education, and schools that need it the most to serve the students. So we get very excited. So please apologize for my enthusiasm as I go through differentiated assistance. I honestly will try to contain myself. So as a general overview about differentiated assistance, it has 3 levels. General assistance, it's for all districts and COEs and charter schools in the state. Differentiated assistance, as we'll be getting into, is a different level of support based on meeting the criteria under the state priority areas. And then the last one, intensive intervention for LEAs with persistent performance issues over a period of time. So the 23 differentiated assistance looks slightly different than it did last year. The dashboard is used to determine both at the local indicators this year, which was not present last year, and the state indicators, which district COEs and charter schools are eligible for differentiated assistance. And this is the first time since 2019 that we made differentiated assistance determinations for charter schools. The statute had changed just after COVID and changed the criteria that we'll get into that required 2 years of dashboard data. And so last year we were unable to do it with just 1 year. And so we were able to return to differentiated assistance for charter schools this year. And another note, a major change in statute was that differentiated assistance is a 1-year program in the past. So that we didn't, people would ask, how do you exit differentiated assistance? And the answer is you don't exit it, it's a status, and we determine the status annually. But the statute has changed so that you have year 1 of support, and then you have, if a district or a charter school or a COE does not meet the criteria in the second year, then they just go to year 2 and just kind of follow up for the districts and county offices. But that if a charter school, district, or county office meets the criteria again in the second year, they go back to year 1. So the year 1 keeps on going until they no longer meet the criteria, and they can go on to year 2. So that's a big difference. And it's noted we got very excited because we noted that in the downloadable data file, it will see differentiated assistance year 1 to help distinguish that next year when we go to those ones that move into year 2. So there are 3 different methods for determining eligibility for differentiated assistance. And so we have method 1, which is student group performance in 2 or more LCFF state priority areas. So we use the state indicators, the LP, the ELA math, chronic absenteeism, suspension rate, chronic CCI, and graduation rate. That's method 1, solely on the state indicators. And as you'll see, that's where most of the districts and county offices and charter schools are eligible, as based on method 1. Method 2 is a combination of, method 2 is just performance on local indicators. And we'll get through all the priority areas, but each one has a local indicator status. If they meet it in 2 or more priority areas, then that district, county office, or charter school will be eligible for differentiated assistance. So method 1, state indicators. Method 2, local indicators. Method 3 is a combination of both. So, for example, a district meets it in priority area 4 for the state indicator, and then priority area 5 for not met over 2 or more years for the local indicator. That district would be eligible for differentiated assistance under method 3. And just note that the criteria is the same for charter schools, except for charter schools require 2 years of dashboard results versus the 1 year that for COEs and districts. So just an overview of the criteria and the priority areas. So this is priority areas 1 through 3. They're all, they're only state, no state indicators for priority areas 1 through 3, just local indicators. So on basics, implementation of state academic standards, and parent and family engagement, the criteria is not met for more, 2 or more years on the local performance. Priority area 4 is state indicator only, but pupil achievement. So it's red on both ELA and math. It shouldn't say test. It should say both ELA and math indicators, or red on one and orange on the other. So they have to meet that criteria. So there's 3 different criteria. And the third one is a red on the English Learner Progress Indicator for the EL student group only. So for example, if a district in priority area 4 for their student with disabilities student group had a red on both ELA and math, they would check the box for being eligible for this priority area. If the student with disabilities were red on the ELA and orange on math, they would be checked the box. Or if, in this case, the EL student group was red on the LP, they would check that box. So they have 3 different ways to check the box for pupil achievement. For pupil engagement, so this is basically on being high schools or K-8s, the graduation rate indicator or the chronic absenteeism absence indicator. And so a district is not going to have, it could be, for charter schools, it's only going to be, they only have one option. There's not going to be 2 indicators that could identify it, like in priority area 4, just one. And school climate, red on suspension indicator, or not met for 2 or more years on local performance. So this has a state indicator piece and a local indicator piece. Access to broad course of study, priority area 7, just a local indicator piece, not met for 2 or more years on the local performance. Number 8, outcomes in a broad course of study, red on the CCI indicator. Now for this year, we did not have color, and so we used proxy, we used status levels as a proxy as we've done in the past for the LP, and we did last year for all the indicators. So a very low would equal a red for the college and career indicator. And then for county offices of education only, priority areas 9 and 10, coordination of services for expelled pupils and coordination of services for foster youth. And the criteria is local again, for not met for 2 or more years on the local performance. Any questions on the criteria? All right, so multi-year COE and differentiated assistance eligibility. So kind of going over the years. And so in 2019, there's 333. 2022, there were 617. And for this year, in 2023, there are 455. And a lot of that had to do with the spike in chronic absenteeism rates last year. And then the use of like I said, proxies, red or very low is a proxy for red, but not a perfect proxy. So the combination of the high absenteeism rate with the use of status levels did change that. And so you see that our trajectory, and you'll see this for CSI and IATSI, is our trajectory is moving back. Hopefully next year you'll see us getting closer to the pre-pandemic levels. So we like to highlight those that no longer need assistance. So districts or COEs that were in differentiated assistance last year, but are no longer in differentiated assistance this year, are 220. And those that are newly eligible, so they were not in differentiated assistance last year, but are in this year, there are 58 districts and COEs that are newly identified. So some key points about the differentiated assistance for charter schools and districts. Like I said, 617 or 62.1% of all COEs and districts were eligible for differentiated assistance across the state. In 2023, 222 or 36% of the districts are eligible for differentiated assistance. And they made improvements or no longer eligible for differentiated assistance. In 2023, again, approximately 455 or 45.9% of all COEs and districts are eligible for differentiated assistance. So overall, there's been an improvement in performance in and specifically in the chronic absenteeism indicator that led to the decrease in the overall number of COEs and districts eligible for differentiated assistance. And since going back to it, differentiated assistance is a status, there is no requirement to exit. And so when you show that improvement, as Cindy had highlighted, that improvement in color from red to orange, will have a huge impact on differentiated assistance because we only look at the reds for the chronic absenteeism for that specific indicator or that priority area. Oops. So overall, for COE and districts, by student group, the 3 student groups that were eligible for the most for differentiated assistance, in order of highest from highest to lowest, are students with disability. Top 3 students with disabilities at 268, homeless students at 173, and then English learners at 165. And so not to get confused, but a district or county can be, they can have all their student groups meet the criteria for differentiated assistance. But there were 268 districts or COEs that met the criteria just based off of the students with disabilities, 173 for homeless, and then 165 for English learners. Charter school eligibility criteria. So if Melanie's been long enough to maybe remember or hopefully put this in the recesses of your mind, that the criteria in 2019 for charter schools was really difficult to explain. It was really difficult to present on, and it needed a lot of work. So the goal of the statute of the change of the criteria from 2019 was to align it better with the district and COE under the LCFF priority areas. Before, it was based on color and had nothing really to do with the priority areas. The new criteria is much more aligned with the LCFF priority areas and much easier to explain. So in 2023, we have 3 different methods that a charter school could make differentiated assistance. The state indicators, as I mentioned, method 1, local indicators only, method 2, and a combination of state and local indicators, method 3. And then in 2022, because we didn't have local indicators available for 2022, is just the state priority areas, or the state indicators on the priority areas 4, 5, and 6. So only method 1. And what we did was we looked, it's the same criteria, so that a student group has to meet it in 2 or more priority areas in 23, and then a student group has to meet it in 2 or more priority areas in 2022. But we as a side note, it doesn't have to be the same student group. So if if you're ABC Unified and the English learners student group met it in 23, it could be another student group that meets it in 2022. So it doesn't have to be the same student group. Which we got with that was a point of a lot of questions from the field. So charter schools, some key points. They're returning for the first time since 2019 to differentiated assistance. And they're, as I mentioned, their eligibility criteria is in accordance with the new statutes. And due to this change in criteria, and it is a significant change, it is not valid to look at 2019 for comparison reasons. So in 2023, 197 or 15.4% of all charter schools statewide are eligible for differentiated assistance. Of those 197 charter schools, 49 of them, or 25%, are alternative schools under the DOSPOR Alternative School Status Program. So charter schools eligibility by student group for the top 3, very similar to charter school or COEs and districts. Students with disabilities, socioeconomically disadvantaged, and English learners. And with that, are there any questions about differentiated assistance under LCFF before I move on to a verbal update on ESSA?
First, I deeply appreciate your enthusiasm for differentiated assistance. Thank you. Just a couple of questions. One is we see a huge swing, at least a decrease in districts that are eligible for DA And I'm hearing it's mostly because of chronic absenteeism. Are there any other changes following chronic absenteeism that have pulled districts out of that status?
I don't think so. I think that is the main contributor.
Hi, Kimberly Montank, Administrator of the Accountability Development and, Accountability Development and Policy Analysis Unit. You'll see me soon. For chronic absenteeism, as Cindy explained, in that overall, districts improved. So if districts improve, right, they got yellow or they got orange. So they're out of those red categories. So that's what the difference is. Last year, they all had that very low status, which was the trigger to get you into differentiated assistance. This year, chronic absenteeism got better across the board. It's likely not where we want it to be, but they improved and showed that improvement. So therefore, they're not getting that ding of a red in that category this year.
And one more follow-up. What is the predominant reason for eligibility now? Like which indicator is keeping districts statewide?
Let me pull up my laptop.
So the fun part is we do publish state board memos for both differentiated assistance and ESSA determinations. So you can actually see a breakdown of all of the different ways that schools and districts were identified using the criteria. So since you do have to meet the qualification over multiple criteria, right, priority areas, it's in 2 or more. So overall, we've seen priority 4, which is academic, right, is usually the leading driver of, a lot of districts have eligibility in priority area 4, but it's getting another priority area, right, qualification within that area. So in 2022, it was with chronic absenteeism. That's where we saw it popping up. So it will obviously either be for CCI in priority area 8 or graduation rate, chronic absenteeism, or suspension.
So to answer your question specifically, and I took great pride in the December memo to the Board on Differentiated Assistance. I even break it down by county, so I tell you how many entities are in a county, and then how many of those entities are in differentiated assistance. And so that's one of the questions I do answer on the state board, but I will give it to you. So priority is 4 and 6 are that's the main driver. So statewide there were 339 student groups that met the priority areas in just 4 and 6. And in second place, in a far second place, it's priority areas 4 and 5 at 189. So there's a big drop off so the academic has a large piece. It's usually that, and so going back to what Kim and Cindy presented, when a district, they'll usually trigger priority area 4 if they're going to trigger anything. And then last year, almost every district triggered priority area 6, and then it skyrocketed. So when you see that improvement though from this year, just because it was pretty hard to not show improvement on as a state overall, that you're not gonna hit that 6. And so districts are likely to still be hitting the 4 if they hit the 4 last year, but not hitting the 6 this year. Yes.
Hey, Todd Collins from Palo Alto Unified. As one of the public comment or one of the correspondents pointed out, and this is something I hadn't realized, and I think you just mentioned it, the eligibility for differentiated assistance, which is always a little bit of a quirky term for me because you're required to take it. It's not optional to take it, right? It's like I'm not eligible to receive a ticket if I go through a red light. The officer wants to hand me a ticket, I'm going to have to take it. If math and ELA performance are lumped into one.
LP too.
Yeah, I'm sorry, and
the English Learner Progress Indicator.
Yeah, so I could be red for every student group in ELA and math, but not qualify for not be eligible for differentiated assistance if I was not red in any other categories.
Correct.
So how does that seem to you? I mean, do you have an opinion on that, or? Okay. Very sensible.
So just to note, the priority areas are from the LCFF statute. So this isn't, state
I
board.
get it. It's not your decision. Right.
The state board adopted the rubrics per LCFF statute that was written in 2013. So those rubrics are established were in 2016 as to the priority areas and which indicators needed to be developed within each of those areas.
I appreciate that. I think it's worth pointing out, I didn't realize that. I think a lot of people probably don't realize that you could, in fact, be, red for every student group in ELA and math, but if you were not red in some other category, in some other priority, you would not qualify for, you'd not be eligible for differentiated assistance.
And that's a direct reflection, Cindy Kazanis, that's a direct reflection of the backlash from the prior system. So the prior system placed all of its value on assessments, and the legislature wanted to see a more holistic accountability system, which is why you see the language very intentional of being assessments plus something else. So that you would not be in differentiated assistance solely because of assessments. Justin's going to talk a little bit, though, about the federal accountability system, which is a bit different. But for the state system, I would also just add it was absolutely a backlash from the No Child Left Behind days.
I appreciate your adding that context, Cindy, but I'll just provide my feedback. I think the idea that school districts that are red in math and ELA, the two academic areas that we measure, that measure directly, and they're not eligible for differentiated assistance, seems counterintuitive to me.
Yeah, and actually, that would be an interesting thing to look at. I mean, how many are actually in red for both of those and not eligible? Because I don't know that we've actually done that work. We've not been asked to do that work, but I don't know that it's not like there's a bunch out there. If you're red in your assessments, you're most likely having issues in other areas.
I would love to see that if you were able to.
Have to see. You're going to hear about our accountability work plan, which is very ambitious for this year. So I'm not committing to anything at this point.
I say twice the work in half the time is what it looks like to me, right?
I'm going to say, Cindy, that I know Vina Nambiar is listening, and she's probably already working on those numbers. But to also what Cindy was saying about the prior system. So I've worked on this for a long time, and I've had and going back to Vina, I pulled on her knowledge. She's worked on program improvement under No Child Left Behind for years, and so a lot of the language was you're identified, and it was like this red flag, and so what we try to do is like this like you're eligible is that we wanted to create the language and the environment with this is the system of support, not to point out districts that are doing bad, but to offer support for those that need help to make sure that their student groups are achieving at a higher level. And so when even this goes down to even the language I use and choosing to use eligibility versus identified. And that is a very conscious choice on my part because I want this program to be supportive of the districts and schools and charter schools, and under ESSA, all the schools that are Title I and non-Title I, depending on the context.
Thank you, Justin. We have Babatunde, and then we'll go over to this side of the dais, row.
Thank you. So my question actually kind of, I guess, builds on this idea of multiple measures. And one of the areas that is priority areas are priorities 1 through 3, which are the local indicators. So I was actually curious, and it might be in that memo that I haven't read, but I was curious how many LEAs identified for DA was because of potentially a combination of one of those 1 through 3. And it could be along with 4, right, or what have you. But I'm curious, out of the LEAs, how many of them were identified because of 1 through 3 in addition?
Oh, I have for specifically 1 through 3. I'd have to take that back and look at our data file. The answer to your question, just in general, under method 2, there are not very many. There's only. I'm going to check that. I know for method 3, there are only 2 statewide. So it is a very low number because the priority, historically, the local indicators do not catch that many districts or county offices.
And I saw a hand over here. Was it Matt? Go ahead.
Thank you. That was my exact question that was just asked.
So there's 19 statewide that met the two. Out of that, I would have to look at, go dig deeper into what priority areas those came from.
I see another hand out of the corner of my eye. Judy and then Josh.
So when we think about differentiated assistance and whether or not districts are eligible, Shasta County, which I'm the superintendent of, we also support our geographic area in addition to our 24 districts in our county. Districts don't wait. If they're in red and needing assistance, you saw a slide early on in this section around general assistance or tier 1, depending on the terminology that's used. We reach out to them and offer support. We also see that districts will reach out and request support. So it's not a game of waiting until red in order to reach out and think about improving systems. So I think that's just an important point to include.
Thank you, Judy. Justin, you ready for ESSA?
Yeah, one more question.
One more. Josh, then Kelsey.
Well, first, thank you for sharing. And a question that I have particularly for the eligibility, particularly English learners, is it just group or is it in your data work, have you seen a distinction between like LTELs and newcomers for this?
We haven't, and this will be part of the accountability plan. We have not done that work within like the English learner. In terms, it's quite complicated to do that. But we will. This is why our work plan is so ambitious, because there's a lot of work that goes into determining that. Just to look at the data takes a lot of work just to recreate everything. So we'll be getting to that this year. So stay tuned. I'm very excited, by the way, about the LTELs, because I've worked a lot with LTELs. I worked in the definitions. I've presented on LTEL data, and if you're familiar with the definition, it's statewide. It's based on 4 criteria, but sometimes because of COVID or because of testing, the data's not the criteria is not available. So the numbers go up and down every year, and because it's not consistent. So it's been a very interesting place to speak into, but a very important group to discuss and keep in mind.
Kelsey.
Thanks. I want to echo my colleagues' interest around potentially looking at the pupil achievement indicator if it's possible within the work plan. I think that's important to check if there are any districts that are not eligible, particularly with science coming in as well. My other question is around the 2-year performance for charter schools versus 1 year for LEAs, and I wonder if there's been any exploratory work there, as we see there's some volatility in eligibility for DA over the past few years with hundreds entering and exiting, if 2 years of performance data would impact that. Although we don't expect the same kind of shock to our data as we've had from a pandemic, but I wonder if that's been explored also.
So can you rephrase I'm not quite sure the question.
So charter schools, you've done work to align the eligibility requirements for charters with LEAs, with the exception.
They just give me the criteria. I haven't done that. That work was done by the legislature.
So I wonder about the 2 years of performance data that's being used for eligibility for charters, and why there isn't alignment in that area either, and if that's been explored for LEAs as well.
Kelsey, with many things, the department doesn't have a say in that, so we have not explored that. That is a policy decision that was made by the administration and by the legislature. So the question probably should be directed to those folks.
I don't want to host their meeting. Justin, ready for ESSA? No, too busy. I got a 1-year-old. Okay, any other questions as we transition to ESSA? All right, take it away, Justin.
All right, ESSA. So I apologize, it's not slides because I would have preferred slides, but we did release ESSA after the period of 10 days that we need for Bagley-King Act to post this. So it has to be a verbal update because we posted this on last Wednesday, so the very last day of January on the 22nd 23, 24 as assistance list based on the dashboard. So I'm just going to read it, if you're like me, I'm very visual, so the slides would have helped. If you can ask me questions at any time, I'd be happy to answer to them. So we have 3 tiers of ESSA. We have CSI, low graduation rate. We have CSI, low performing, and we have ATSI, and that's a hierarchy. So a school cannot be more than one category. So we look at CSI, low graduation rate. If you meet that criteria, you're taken out of the pool, and then you're trickled down. All schools, Title I and non-Title I funded schools, are eligible for CSI low graduation rate. Like I said, if you're eligible, then you're removed from the pool. All remaining schools that were not eligible for CSI low graduation rate, that are Title I schools, are eligible for CSI low performing. And then if you meet that criteria, you're removed from the pool. And then we look at ATSI, or additional targeted support and improvement. And those are for both non-Title I funded and Title I funded schools. So the only one that's Title I funded that we look at specifically is CSI low performing. All other ones, it's any school within the state. And so with the low graduation criteria, it's pretty simple. We look at a 3-year graduation rate, and if it's below 68.0%, rounded to the nearest tenth, then you are in CSI low graduation rate. So if for example, we just add up the number of students and in your cohort and the number of students that graduated over 3 years. So it'd be 23, 22, and 21. And we add up all the students. So say you had 30 students in each year. It'd be 90 students overall, and we would divide that by the number that graduated. And so that would provide us with a rate. CSI low performing is based off the state indicators within the dashboard, and we have 3 criteria. And so the goal, not the goal, but we are mandated to identify no less than 5%. So we can't identify 4.9999. It has to be, not even rounded, it has to be no less than 5% of Title I schools that are remaining have to be identified or eligible for CSI low performing. And so we have a criteria. And what we do is we have 4 criteria. We apply the criteria until we get to no less than 5%. So last year, for example, we only had to apply criterions 1 and 2. This year, you'll see that we had to apply criteria 1, 2, and 3, and we do have a 4th criteria that we could apply based off our ESSA state plan if required. So the criteria that we use this year, criterion 1, all red indicators. So if you're for all student group, you're at the school level, all of them are red. That does apply if I talked to a district yesterday that they had a school that had 1 state indicator, the suspension rate, and that indicator was red. They are in CSI low performing because all their indicators, even though it's 1, is red. Criteria 2 is all red indicators except for 1 of another color. This also applies if you have 2 indicators and one of them is red and the other one is blue. You will be in CSI low performing. Criterion 3, 5 or more, is when a school has 5 or more indicators where the majority are red. So that would be 3 or more, but if you have 6, the majority has to be red. So if you had 6 indicators, which is, some schools do have 6 indicators, and you had 3 that were red, you would not qualify. But if you had 5 indicators and you had 3 that were red, you would qualify. And so we hit the 5% using criteria 3. As a note, this actually begins the 3-year cycle, which I'm very excited about because we have. If you are so interested in ESSA as I am, there's another category called targeted assistance, targeted support and improvement (TSI), that we've never done before because we had to get on a 3-year cycle. And because of different things and working with the feds and COVID, that 3-year cycle has never happened. This is the 3-year cycle. It starts. So we will not be making CSI low graduation rate, CSI low performing, or ATSI determinations until the results of the 26 dashboard. In the meantime, we do make annual determinations on TSI starting next year with the dashboard. And that at any point, every year, we will determine those schools that meet the exit criteria for CSI or ATSI. So we won't make entry determinations for CSI or ATSI, but we will determine those ones that have, the schools that have made the exit criteria. Are there any questions so far before I get into the data? All right. So ATSI, the criteria is the same for CSI as it is, CSI low performing as it is for ATSI. The only difference, there's two differences. One, ATSI is at the student group level. So for example, the English learner student group has to meet the criteria of all red indicators, all red but one, the majority red when there's 5 or more indicators. And the second, so one is at the student group level. The second difference is it requires 2 years of dashboard data. So you have to go, we look at 23 and 22. So that a school for the EL student group would have to meet the criteria in both dashboard years. And as you may recall, ATSI was about over 6,200 schools statewide, which is, overall, I think 70% of the schools, generally speaking, were eligible for CSI or ATSI last year, which is that's a significant number. A lot of that had to do with the fact that the ATSI only had 1 year of data. And so we normally look at 2 years data. So the biggest jump was the number of schools from 1,000 in 2019 to over 6,000 in 2022. And so you see that big jump. So going through it, there's been remarkable improvement in CSI and ATSI statewide. And you'll see this, but as much pride as I took in the December State Board memo, I also took a lot of pride in the February State Board memo that's posted. And so all this data, all the criteria, all these tables are available for you to peruse at your leisure. Going through the criteria overall, there are for CSI low performing, the ones that met criteria 1, all red indicators, there were 77 schools statewide that met criteria 1. All red but 1, criteria number 2, there was 179 schools that met criteria 2. And so last year, we exceeded that 5% threshold just by using two criterions. We were way under that number this year. And so then we had to apply criteria 3. And so I think it's a point of distinction because it looks like the numbers haven't changed that much for CSI low performing, but they have changed significantly because of the 5% rule. And you'll see a big jump. So 77 under criterion 1, 179 on criterion 2, and then criterion 3, 5 or more indicators where the majority are red, 281 schools met the criteria. And so going through all the different datas, overall, there are 289 schools that met CSI low graduation rate. CSI low performing in all 3 criterions, 540. ATSI is at 2,363, and then no status. They are no longer, the school is no longer in CSI or not in CSI at all. ATSI, no status, had no assistance needed, 6,852 and there's out of a total of 10,044 schools. And so just looking at the data, I'll just go through by charter school status, and then I'll do DAS status, and then I'll do some ATSI, because these are a lot of numbers to throw at you. So just as a quick, so CSI low performing, there were 98 charter schools that met the criteria, low graduation rate, 98 met the criteria, or 7.7% of all charter schools. CSI low performing for charter schools, there's 51 at 4.0%. ATSI, there were 187 charter schools that met the criteria at 14.7%. And that had no assistance, 937 charter schools, 73.6% of all charter schools did not qualify for CSI or ATSI. For DAS schools, there were 200, and you'll see this is true just based on the nature of the school, 267 DAS schools, or 28% of DAS schools were eligible for CSI low graduation rate, which is 2/3 of the grad, or 3/4 of the grad school, or the CSI low graduation schools are DAS schools. CSI low performing, there was 121 DAS schools. At 12.7% of DAS schools are eligible for CSI low performing. ATSI at 68 at 7.1%. And then no assistance, 498 or 52.2% of all DAS schools are not eligible for CSI or ATSI. So but DAS schools, outside that, you'll see that they are highly concentrated in the CSI low graduation because of the nature of a lot of these alternate schools. But they have shown remarkable improvement, a 10% improvement overall. So, for example, in the prior year, 57.5% of DAS schools statewide were eligible for either CSI or ATSI. That number dropped by 10 percentage points to 47.5% of DAS schools statewide eligible for CSI and ATSI. And so that ends my presentation. Any questions on ESSA, CSI, ATSI?
And Justin, just to remind CPAG and anyone listening that if folks wanted to see those numbers in print, they could go to the February State Board memo?
That's correct.
Excellent. Thank you. Cindy?
So we just have a couple more slides, and then I'll return it to Chair Green on next steps.
We'll take a break after this piece of the item.
Great. So getting out a dashboard is a monumental process. So one of the things that we started to do in 2022 was to create a toolkit and to get these materials out well ahead of a release of a dashboard. So the dashboard toolkit was started to be released as early as, late summer of this past year, and we worked on adding information to the toolkit throughout the fall, so that by the time we got to the actual dashboard release on December 15th, our districts were well aware of materials they could use to talk about the dashboard with their communities, with their principals, with teachers. Many of the flyers, especially the ones that are geared towards parents, are translated into our top, I think it's 5 or 7 languages, and so that is available as well. We also, for the first time, did some long on-demand recordings, 25 minutes to 20 to 30 minutes. So if you really want to dig into any of the indicators, those are available and memorialized on our YouTube channel. Kelsey had asked about this, or around the participation rates. So just as a reminder, off of the dashboard, which is hosted by our contractor, which is San Joaquin County Office of Education, the department also hosts on its own website the additional reports that are listed on this slide. So for each of the indicators, you can see the 5x5 placement reports. We also have a college career placement report, college career measures report. There's a completion that is the two metrics together, A through G and CTE completion, and this is actually something that districts and charter schools are asked to use as part of their LCAP planning process. There's the graduation rate additional report, which is part of, I mentioned the DAS piece. You'll also see the participation rate report for academic, and then on the far side, you can also see we've got the LPAC participation rate, our student group report, which is very strongly used by was asked for our counties, who have the responsibility, of course, of approving LCAPs for districts, district performance by county, and then charter performance by county. So these reports in themselves are a lot, but they are again, in response to requests over the years from the field, from educators, from especially county office leaders who have such a important part of the system of accountability and the system of support, a important role in helping to make sure that our schools and our districts in need are supported. So we are going to, this is my last slide, and then we're going to take the break, but I just want to prime the conversation. Legislation last year, actually part of the budget trailer bill, which meant it was effective immediately, has shifted our requirements as far as producing the dashboard. And so this past year, we started with something that was familiar to us, which was a mid-December release. This fall, this December 1 is not really December 1, because December 1 is a Sunday. So I think if we were to release on a Sunday, we get a little bit of backlash. If we release that Friday, it's Black Friday, and so we get some more backlash. So it's more like a November 22nd release date, and so you're going to hear about how that directly impacts the work of my team in our accountability work plan. But what you see is a gradual increase, or rather moving up of the dates, and the theory behind that, and the administration's the one that put this forward, and the legislature, of course, embraced it and passed it into law, is to make sure that we're getting out, again, multiple measures data all at the same time. So the assessment data doesn't stand by itself when it's released in October, because that's been its traditional release date, but we can also see the dashboard at the same time. But the other piece of it, which I think is even more important, is it gives our county offices the opportunity to get into those schools, those charter schools, and those districts well ahead of the holidays, right? So the more time that they have to work in the current year in a district, the more time that you have to impact student learning and outcomes. So that is the dashboard publication deadlines as we hit the next 3 years. And with that, I will turn it back to Chair Green for a pause.
I am so excited for that timeline. I have several schools that are up for WASC renewal this year. And they're regularly like bringing back the reports to their school communities. And so in 2026, schools that are thinking about WASP moving through that process, they can really have everything all together and then unpack that, just like Cindy said. So excited for thinking about the school communities that will be able to use those different pieces of information to think about how they want to improve for our kids. We are going to take a 10-minute break. It is 10:22, so come back at, you know what, let's just make it easy. Let's come back at 10:35, and we'll continue with our item. So thank you. Thank you so much, CPAG members, for coming back from break. I'm going to pass it over to Nancy to do a roll call to make sure we have a quorum.
Right. Melanie Green.
Present.
Judy Flores.
Here.
Ronald Anaya.
Here.
Mia Cooper. Roddy Bunchoy.
Here.
Babatunde Ilori.
Here.
Gabriela Tavitian. Amy Nguyen Hernandez.
Here.
Todd Collins. Kelsey Crossan.
Present.
Samara Palco.
Present.
Angela Pasquale.
Here.
Matt Patterson.
Present.
Joshua Salas.
Here.
Charlotte Vega.
Here.
All right, we have a quorum.
Thank you so much. So we'll continue with item 1. We are on the 2024 Accountability Work Plan.
Good morning again. Cindy Kazanis, again, Director of the Analysis, Measurement, and Accountability Reporting Division. We are going to spend the second half of this item walking through the work plan for 2024. So I was actually just thinking about it as we took our break. I took this job, I was asked to take this job in fall of 2026. No, 2016. 2026 hasn't happened yet. That would have been a nightmare. And I was told, oh, all you have to do is get this accountability system approved by the board. Like, you know, it's a big lift, but you can do that. They didn't tell me this was going to keep going. Like, we have come back, and I think that is the point of this first bullet, is continuous improvement within the system. I also now have an almost 8-year-old, so I was pregnant at the time I took the job, and I see the changes just in, of course, a child that goes from an infant to an 8-year-old and can't stop talking. Just, you know, continuous improvement is a great thing to be committed to, because unlike the former accountability system, which I know we've mentioned, there wasn't really that kind of approach. And so it was very difficult to introduce any changes in the system. We've been fortunate also to have a board and leadership, and member Glover Woods is one of those as our liaison that embraces those times when we run into a situation, when we have taken a risk and it didn't quite work out, and we have to reestablish cut scores for our academic indicator, or something that in other states may be a really high bar. In California, it's actually built into the system. And so we do make changes on a regular basis to the system when it makes sense. It's not done and it's not taken lightly. It is something that has to go through the level of scrutiny that any accountability system does so that you maintain the integrity of the system. So you're going to hear about a couple of the things we're going to be working on this year. And we normally, as we have in past years, you're the first place that we take this plan to for feedback. And then it goes to the Board of Education in March to adopt and provide feedback on as well. We're going to be moving that up in future years, and you're going to hear about that in just a moment. But the March meeting is really for us to get that official blessing from the board again to do our work throughout the year, because we are staffed to the board for this system. So we left the conversation before the break about this moving up the deadlines, and moving up the deadlines for December 1st, as I mentioned, means actually probably at least a week to 10 days earlier. With that in mind, we no longer have the time that we used to do in previous years to actually get everything accomplished in time for approval by the state board in September. And just to think about why that's important for my team, those of you that are in schools or districts know that the state asks you for data about what kids did throughout the school year every summer. And that collection is done through our student level data system called CalPADS. CalPADS, we have moved up that deadline to August 15th. And so as soon as August 15th happens and closes, we're going to start pulling that data and start working on establishing cumulative enrollment, establish our directory file, and then actually get to the work of calculating these indicators, which takes several months. And it takes several months because this is high stakes and we want to get it right. And so Justin talked about all of his colleagues that work on things around differentiated assistance. You never heard it was just one single person. These are dual processed files. Sometimes they're triple processed. Sometimes there's a whole team of people that work on them. And because, again, it's not a report that is automated out of the student level data system. There are metrics that the board has established that we have to apply. This is a manual process, which, of course, we're using very high tech. We're using the latest statistical software and such, but it still takes time to do that. So all that to say, this is our transition year in terms of adjusting our windows for work. And I anticipate 2025 will shift up the board conversation to a January conversation, which may mean, Sarah, that we'll have to do a CPAG meeting in December. I'm not quite sure yet, but we're talking about it earlier this week so that you all have an input on that plan. So we have about 3 months. As soon as the board says in March that the plan is good, please start working on these things until you all meet again, because June 14th, the Flag Day, is just around the corner for us. And prior to anything coming to you, we want to make sure that it's met not only the technical threshold that we require to do our work, but also a policy consideration. And so we've already, as I mentioned earlier, started some of those conversations. And the technical work group will also have a say into it. So what you see this in the next couple of slides is, again, based on this truncated work plan for 2024. And then in 2025, hopefully we can pick up some speed and we'll have a little bit more wiggle room. So we are thrilled that the first thing on the top of the list is the science assessments onto the dashboard. And I'm going to talk through that a bit before turning over the rest of this deck, or most of this deck, to Kimberly. We'll also talk about transitional kindergarteners and our long-term English learners, our student groups, student populations that need to be considered in the dashboard, looking a little bit at our college career indicator, and new data that we've been collecting, and then providing an update on our growth model work and the data release around that. And then we'll finish off with priority 1 and state level data. So things that come to you and things that arrive at the work plan sometimes are months in the making, like the long-term English learners, which was part of legislation that requires us to do that. Others are years in the making, like the science assessment results, which first came to the board for consideration in 2018. So just a little background on this. That was the first year of the operational test for the California Science Test. The field refers to this as CAST, C-A-S-T. This is required to be administered to students in grades 5, 8, and then once in high school, typically either a 10th, 11th, or 12th grades. We first started talking about this incorporation of the dashboard in 2020. I would like to point out, if you haven't seen or pay attention in meetings past, for those of you that have been members, is the science community is very well organized. I was talking to them yesterday and comparing it to, like, there's not a graduation rate community out there. There are high schools, right? But there's not an organized group out there around graduation rates. And so just thinking about, when something like this comes to the board and the group is organized, they're persistent, they are well-meaning, it gains traction. And that's what has happened, particularly with this particular piece. And so this was the last time the board met in person before COVID. I remember being here. It was a very jam-packed meeting in March of 2020. And they talked about potential incorporation of the science test. And we were so optimistic this could have gotten done within the next couple of years. And then, of course, everything sort of fell apart with the pandemic, and there was this relaxation of not doing assessments for those year or two. So we have continued to provide the board an update on when it would be feasible for us to turn our attention to science. And that has been in 2022, not only at the March meeting, but the September meeting, where the board approved a link to those results off of the dashboard as a sign to the field that this is coming, be prepared. Again, we saw that on the actual dashboard in 2022 and again in 2023. So we've now arrived, and we're just thrilled that we not only have access to stable assessment data for the CAS, but also for the alternative assessment. So those are, together they will create what we think could be a science indicator, as the board has shown its support for, at least in previous meetings, on the dashboard in 2024. Each of these metrics you're going to see aligns with a principle, a dashboard principle, or accountability principle, rather, that were adopted by the board. I think it's been over a year. And so those principles you can see in their completion on our website. If you just do accountability principles or dashboard principles, it comes up. It's always the top one there. So principle 5 for the science indicator, it's because this indicator will value high performance and growth equally, just like the rest of our indicators. Principle 8, reflecting on the technical quality of it. We're going to make sure that the metric meets that validity and reliability threshold. And then principle 11, that we know that the indicator is not just going to sit there. If there's changes that need to be made, we will think about the continuous improvement process and propose revisions or improvements as needed. So this is, in trying to think about how to describe the work, and again, that 3-month period I talked about, we realized very quickly as we were putting this slide together, it would be impossible to do this in 3 months. It would be a disservice to do this in a very quick period of time. And so the points that you see here that I'll walk through individually actually will probably span more like a 3-year period. And we, in talking with, again, the advocates from the science community yesterday, there's some work to do. There's some work to do around educating the field about not only why this matters, but you've now got an indicator and you're not doing well. Now what? Like, what if you haven't implemented the curriculum with fidelity? That's not going to get started in a couple-month period of time. This is, a large buildup. And so we are hoping that, again, this work plan is not only reflective of the resources that we have in the department to do this work, but also the thoughtfulness of engaging the field and making sure that those that are in positions to support the system of support are prepared for this when it actually does become a part of differentiated assistance or our ESSA criteria. So in terms of the 6 decision points, the first being, what is the methodology? There's not something that's standardized out there. The federal government doesn't tell us how to do this. They just say it needs to be valid and reliable, and you need to be able to, base this on something that you can, speak with confidence on that's going to meet that test. We will also, once the methodology is established, recommend the adoption of cut points, not only for status, but for change, and then a color scheme for the 5x5 grid. So there are some examples out there, of course, because we have other indicators that have been established. But this is a bit of a different indicator because it's not in every single grade level. It skips grade levels, which means you're going to have schools that may not have any students enrolled, like a K through 3 school. And so thinking through all of those considerations as this is developed is going to be important. The final 2 steps are around eligibility for support. So how would this indicator come on board in the accountability system on the state side for differentiated assistance and that criteria? And then how would it come on board with the federal system through the Every Student Succeeds Act? So the first step would be for the board, and we believe this is possible in 2024, to approve a metric to measure science to be used on the dashboard. And so one of the things that we've asked San Joaquin to do for us is to mock up an indicator. What would a baseball card look like, not having status, not having color, but just having information about performance on the test? And so thinking about again, what we look at for our English language arts and mathematics assessments, we know that the science assessments have similar characteristics, right? It's done in a setting, that the testing piece of it is well proctored, that we've have ways that we report the results, and so we can report those all with confidence. But there are these unique features, and especially when we think about our high school students, for example, does the student who took the test in 10th grade get included in the indicator that year, or do you hold that score until they get to 12th grade? And you consider it to be a 12th grade indicator. So those are things that we'll work through, and we are working very closely with not only the testing contractor, but those that are in our assessment division who work on this test every single day. So we're not without help from the field, and we actually got some help from West Ed, from the National West Ed on this piece as well, to look at what other states have been doing, because other states have adopted this. It's not universal, but they have, and we have some information from those states about how they're including it in their ESSA state plan. So decision points 2 to 4, thinking about how we get to a color. We need to look again at the distribution once that methodology is established for how we would establish the cut points for status and change, and then that's color scheme. And so again, for those of you that were part of CPAG this past year, you got to do the latter 2 parts, the establishment of cut scores for change and the color scheme for a 5x5 grid for the English Learner Progress Indicator. So this is something that we will come back to you on. We will ask for your opinions about how the cut scores were established, and feedback about whether or not we're missing something in that distribution. Like I said, we have other indicators we've done this for, and so there's a practice that has been established about how that distribution setting takes place. But still, it is a public process. We want to be transparent about it. It will be included in our technical guides, and it is part of what we have to submit ultimately if we ask this to be included in our Every Student Succeeds Act state plan. It is required to be a part of that document. And then 5 and 6, we talked a little bit about, but just in terms of eligibility, we're going to be asking the board, and we're asking you whether or not this should be included in our differentiated assistance system and considered in the criteria for the Every Student Succeeds Act. One thing I will mention, with having these be rolled out over the next couple of years, and especially the LCFF criteria being for the 2025 dashboard, that ability to think about resources, think about how to support the field in this area, I think will be really critical. We heard that yesterday from the science community. They were already doing a breakout exercise about what does this look like when you know that you have schools that maybe haven't implemented the curriculum as broadly as others. For decision point 6, I want to go back to something that Justin talked about a little earlier. And I realize that we probably drowned you in data. Sometimes that's good, because then you realize we do a lot of technical work, but it also is bad because it's maybe difficult to follow. So I want to make sure I elevate what he said. This is the first time California has been able to establish a 3-year list for the CSI and ATSI eligibility criteria. And why that's important is because you now have comprehensive support and improvement schools that have 3 years of support, dedicated support. They may exit the system, so they may be able to get out, but we're not changing that list from year to year like we've had to do over the last several years because the U.S. Department of Education has said, well, you've been out of compliance and you had DASN, so you have to reestablish a list. So other states have had the ability to have these cohorts, essentially, of, again, our lowest performing schools. We were just talking to Hawaii. I serve on the WASC Accreditation Commission, and my colleague from Hawaii was saying, oh, well, we have a school, and they're in their second cohort of being a low performing school. They actually have a whole new word for that terminology. And so this will bring stability to the field. And so we want to make sure that we, when we do add, if we were to add science as part of the ESSA state plan, we bring it in when that 3-year period starts again. So that would be a 2026 inclusion, but so it'll give us time to lead up to that. It'll give us time to figure out how we balance this indicator in our work plan. But we have already started conversations with the U.S. Department of Education. We've had several of them actually around science and around these amendments, and so they're aware that this may be coming. But we do have, again, we've got the luxury of a little bit of time if we're able to, the board adopts this. This idea of a multi-year rollout. So with that, I'm happy to pause on the science piece if there's questions or suggestions, ideas, before we switch over to our new student populations.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Kim?
All right, I will be here for the rest of your morning and hopefully not too much into your afternoon. So this year on the dashboard, we have the privilege of doing something that we haven't done since our last introduction of new student populations to the dashboard when we added homeless and foster youth. Therefore, this year we are going to be addressing 2 new student populations, specifically our TK students who aren't new, but we actually get to find out exactly who they are for the very first time. And additionally, long-term English learners as a brand new student group to the dashboard. With regards to our dashboard principles, for these, the work on this area is covered by Principle 5, valuing high performance and growth equally, because for our LTEL groups, they will be introduced as a student group. Principle 8, with technical quality through measures that are valid and reliable, because there's a lot of work that needs to go into that as well. And again, Principle 11, our favorite, subject to continuous revision and improvement. So this, if you are familiar with our lovely TK students, as I said, those students aren't new to our schools. Some of us are expanding our programs and opportunities to be able to avail TK to our communities. However, these students have been present on school campuses and have been enrolled in schools. But what's unique, and you may not know this, is that the state of California, especially for accountability, we don't know who those students are. Because TK is a 2-year kindergarten program, right? It's the first year of a 2-year program. So in our systems, in all of our data systems, those students are listed as kindergartners. So if you look at the state enrollment for kindergarten, you'll see that it looks like it's double the size of the other grades. And that is specifically because we have guided and instructed all districts, right, to enroll these students as kindergartners and treat them and show them as kindergartners, and they show up as kindergartners throughout both our data system and data reporting. However, beginning this school year that we're in right now, and again, dashboard years, all kinds of other years, 2023-24, this year for the very first time, and it just happened in the Fall 1 data collection that closed, California is requiring schools to submit who the TK students are. So we've collected that information for Fall 1 enrollment, and that's available through CalPADS this year. And that will continue to move forward through our end of year collections as well. So for this calendar year, we'll actually be able to separate out those kindergartners and know which ones are in TK and which one are in kindergarten. So this, again, the first opportunity we have availed to us to be able to look at all of the data we collect in CalPads and separate it out by TK students. So how that applies to the dashboard and the work that we do within our accountability system is at present, TK students are included directly in two measures. And this is a constant question that we get, FAQs, especially last year with chronic absenteeism. So they are involved in both the suspension rate indicator and the chronic absenteeism rate indicator, right? And again, they show up as kindergartners in that way. So we will continue to see them in the dashboard this year as well, right? They're gonna show up, but now we just know exactly when we look at data quests for breakouts of how things have happened and the patterns, we can separate out TK from kindergarten. But on the dashboard, TK are actually excluded, specifically in the LP, or English Language Progress Indicator, because we don't know who those kids are. So the LP is actually a grade 1 through 12 indicator, because we weren't able to see if a student who took the LPAC 2 years in a row and were listed as a kindergartner both years, is that a kindergartner who stayed a kindergartner? Or is that a TKer who advanced a grade and moved to kindergarten? So we were only able to capture growth from kindergarten to first grade. So that they are not involved or included in any way, shape, or form within the English Learner Progress Indicator. And additionally, and this is also something that has come up a lot as TK has gained prominence, we don't, in our school directory and information that's displayed on the dashboard, the grade range says K through 12. It doesn't say TK through 12. Now, preschool sometimes get the P, but the TK isn't added. So just as a note, while TK is included on the dashboard in all of the directory areas, it also just says K throughout the dashboard. So for TK, throughout this year and for our work plan this year, we're going to be looking at, obviously following our collection of data, what the TK population looks like across the suspension rate and chronic absenteeism indicators, as well as the LP and additional information that we have in there. And we will be able to use that information to inform decisions for our 2025 accountability work plan. So any questions around TK?
So as we think about TK, the same holds true when we think about kindergarten. For students who are under age 6, school attendance is not required. And I know it's been a real issue in our part of the state. I would imagine it would be true statewide. If there was a way to change to make compulsory, at least at the kindergarten level, I know we'll never get there for TK because there are so many options, but it really does create challenges as we think about now tracking chronic absenteeism at the TK and K level when it's not required.
So for kindergarten and attendance patterns, we've seen, we work very closely with wonderful partners who happen to be located in California, Attendance Works, who champion the idea of chronic absenteeism as an indicator for academic achievement right across the country. And the patterns of kindergarten attendance establish patterns of chronic absenteeism. And so those students who are chronically absent within kindergarten are the students that remain chronically absent. So it's not so much of a pattern that we see as in students are in schools and districts that have high patterns of attendance, right? Building those attendance patterns within kindergarten moves forward. And so while compulsory attendance laws obviously is a different thing, and that's through truancy, and that is handled through our truancy system. Chronic absenteeism is not a measure of truancy, but a measure of school attendance. And therefore, at present, again, as it was extended through kindergarten, it does apply to all students in that way.
Good.
Thank you for this. And I think we're all still trying to figure out how we address this 14th grade level that we're all adding up and down the state. It's a big shift, developmentally, behaviorally, academically, and so forth. And it makes sense, I suppose, to begin with suspension and chronic absenteeism if we're looking at existing indicators. But I'm curious, this is just kind of a speculative question here, is the information that we are going to be acquiring and processing to inform next year's accountability work plan and beyond, what do we anticipate that'll look like? Is this the creation of new indicators, or is this, what do we want to capture to better understand our work with early childhood education?
It's truly just being able to report out and see what those patterns are, especially with regards to, as we saw, previously we're seeing it lumped as kindergarten, right? And if we're seeing patterns that are different in TK versus kindergartners, right? We've kind of lumped all the kindergartners together. And perhaps maybe some issues are actually within TK, right? Or they're not in TK and they're in kindergarten. That's the information we don't have at this moment because we've lumped those kiddos together. And so I think it's just seeing clarity and being able to have discussions and move forward, especially with a system of support, being able to target and avail resources appropriately as necessary.
Other questions before we move on to the LTELs? Good, Josh.
First off, thank you for the data because, again, right, distinguishing between transition kindergarten and then kindergartners is like a big step forward. I'm curious, as we're thinking about how early childhood's going to go, not only for students, but has there been thoughts about like tracking the teaching assignments? Because I know that's been one of the concerns too about another amount of like teachers to teach the TK folks.
So presently, right, for all kindergarten courses and things that the teacher assignment monitoring outcomes and such, those teachers need to be availed of the proper credentials as well. So all of that information is presently necessary to be submitted through the coursework currently. So that information and the ability to talk about all of that is within the teacher assignment monitoring data.
Any other questions about TK? I was just in a TK classroom the other day. Oh, they are learning CASP scores in 3 years when they're in third grade, however long it takes for a TK to get to third grade. Watch out, because they were reading. Okay, let's go ahead. Keep going, Kim.
All right, so our other student group, and this one versus philosophically and thinking about like, who are these kids? And we finally get to see them, are long-term English learners. And so Cindy had mentioned previously that legislation had passed with the trailer bill, and the Senate Bill 141 actually added long-term English learners as a student group to the dashboard. So similarly, we talked about legislative mandates and other things that we are doing to accommodate the legislation. That is what applies within this situation. So that bill defined a long-term English learner as a student who has not attained English language proficiency within 7 years of initial classification as an English learner. And I'm reading it directly from there because that is exactly from statute. It's in quotes, and anytime I share with anybody, I make sure that we're sharing exactly what the legislature intended. So they will become the 14th student group on the dashboard. Now, I say that with a little bit of reverence because Cindy and myself, we get to be involved with a lot of discussions with other states. She mentioned her conversations with Hawaii. Sometimes we jump in Zoom calls. Sometimes we get to meet these people in person. But there are no other states looking at student group performance like California, and let alone that there's 14. Other states have to squish student groups together in order to make a student group. They call them super groups. And it's the funniest little combinations of different racial and ethnic groups to be able to get to an end size that works. So the fact that we are able to look at student performance in such discrete ways across our LEs and schools is a really unique feature of our system. Obviously, nationally, we can do that too, right? We've got enough students, but it's really unique that we're able to ascribe needs specifically for our system support to get down to that granular level and identify these students so that we can meet them with the needs that they have specific to their student group. So the legislation also derived that LTELs will have the same end size rules that govern foster youth and homeless student groups. So in the legislation, it actually cites that it's 15 or more students will be held accountable at the, it just says that in the legislation.
Well, translating that back out, as you saw, our state and federal systems, the legislation dictates, right, 15 at the LEA level. However, for homeless, foster, and now LTELs, that N size grows to 30 at the school level. And you're thinking like, wait, but there's more students at the LEA level than the school level. Like, that doesn't make sense. The reason why is because in ESSA, we have to have the same N size across all school levels for our student groups. And that N size in our ESSA state plan is 30. So we are not allowed to dip down to that 15 per legislation, right? That's not availed to us because our N size is 30 across the state for schools. So that's a fun fact. It's a fun dashboard ones where you see some very small school districts who will end up with a color for homeless or foster, right, at the LEA level. And then they go to their school reports, they're like, but most of these kids in the district are at this school, but we didn't get a color. That doesn't make sense. That's why, is for those 3 student groups now you'll see that 15, and homeless and foster have been that way since 2018. So, as a new student group, LTELs get to join the dashboard across all of our indicators. So that is suspension, graduation rate, the college career indicator, chronic absenteeism indicator, both of our academic indicators for ELA and math, as well as the English learner progress indicator, which previously only had 1 student group, English learners. So LTELs will also join as a measurement because the criteria for the English learner progress indicator is all English learners who have taken the LPAC in the current or prior year, and all of these LTELs will be availed of that same definition. So we'll have 2 student groups. What that looks like on the dashboard, we'll figure out how we present and bring that forward. But that card will continue to look a little bit more unique than the others were. So just as a frame of reference, I wanted to make sure that folks saw all of the 14 student groups that are available, both with race and ethnicity, and then our program student groups as well. So our work for this year around this action from the legislature is to conduct technical work to operationalize the inclusion of the LTEL student group on the dashboard. You saw that we were gifted a definition. Great, step 1. And now the questions start and all of the wheels start turning and all of those lovely folks that were mentioned by Justin previously, right? Because all of our indicators have unique denominators, right, and unique populations. So first, we need to handle cumulative enrollment, which governs our suspension rate indicator, our chronic absenteeism rate indicator. It says 7 years, but when does that kick in? Does that kick in if it's 7 years within any point of the year? Is it 7 years at any point of the year while they were enrolled with you? What are all of the different ways that we, right, can get to that 7-year calculation within a cumulative enrollment, right? Additionally, what does that look like for the cohort? When we're talking about our graduation rate and we're talking about our college career indicator. For the cohort, presently, any student has EL status within any time in the cohort. So the day they step into, right, they can step into 9th grade as an English learner and be reclassified the next day. In the cohort, they'll be reflected as an English learner. That's the rules that govern the cohort. Are we going to say the same thing for LTELs, right? If they step in 9th grade, are they an LTEL 4 years later, even if they were reclassified again that next day? Those are decisions and rules we need to walk through and look at the data to be able to discuss. And then also our assessment demographics. Our assessment demographics look at things a little bit differently because it's about what your status and your definitions are, and especially with reclassification, when you take the test. So we have a lot of students that get reclassified in the spring, right? But if you happen to take the different tests in right before that, you would still have that status. So as far as an English learner, you would perhaps, if you were an LTEL, right, in April, but you got reclassified on May 1st, after you took the test, are you an LTEL as reflected in our end statistics, where in cumulative enrollment, maybe we'll say you aren't an LTEL. There's a lot of complicated rules, right, for us to be able to resolve and figure this out, even with being gifted a definition of what a student is. So that is the work for us in the next few months to be able to reconcile and work through all of that. Additionally, we also, as Cindy mentioned before about our different materials that we have on the web and our availability to make sure that folks understand and know that this is a student group that will be coming on board on the dashboard, and results will be showing up on the dashboard. And when those LCAPs need to get refreshed and re-updated, right? In the following year, after you've written your LTEL plans this year, those are the students and outcomes you'll be looking at. So, we are going to begin a communications plan, and how do we advertise and create resources to make sure that folks are aware of this. So that's the other side of the end, is when we figure out what we're actually looking at, then how do we share that out to move forward? So with that, any questions about LTELs?
Thank you for that presentation. Really appreciate it. And I think this is tremendously important work when you just think about a student group population that has struggled, right, for academically across the board. Especially too, when you think about the flip side, our reclassified students have seen great and tremendous success. So we know if we can get students reclassified, they tend to see success. A couple questions that I have. One, you touched on it a little bit, is the English Learner Progress Indicator. And I think that during the State Board of Education presentation about a year ago in March, they had stated that maybe potentially re-looking at the cut points for the English Learner Progress Indicator, which is currently the only indicator that's looking at what I would call true growth, following that same student. And so right now, to be high, it's 55% or more of the students are meeting the essentially minimum level of growth or maintaining that high LPAC level. So I was just curious if that's something that you or your team is going to look at, or is that something that's been tabled? So that's just one question I have.
At the State Board has not requested that to be a part of our work plan, and at this time, it's not in the 2024 work plan.
Okay. And the reason I bring that up, and I just want the CPAG, I'd love for other members to chime in and give their thoughts about this, is when you think about true student growth, right, from all the measures on the California dashboard, that's the only one that's looking at apples to apples, where a student started on their summative assessment from 1 year and then waiting another year to take that summative LPAC assessment as well. And we're saying that a high is 55%. We're saying that's good, for 55% or more. I think that we should have higher expectations in our state for student growth than 55%. And I'd love for other CPAG members to weigh in on this, because I think it's critically important, and it connects very deeply to why it's so important that we're looking at the long-term English learners as a student group.
I can actually pause and pop in that as far as, again, remember our status cut scores, when we walked through the change cut score setting, we walked through the color grid process. That same process happened with the LP, right, for status score establishment. And walking through, we've not seen a pattern of distribution that changes that distribution of performance per what is being set as where folks are performing. And remember, it's a distribution of where people are, and we're not seeing a disruption in that status cut score and what's being availed to them. So what has been requested by others, and we've addressed this through state board items and other places, is a different way to set status cut scores. And that is not how the board has chosen to set status cut scores. So we're speaking to an objective measure versus a wishful thinking, which was essentially NCLB. So, and where we want people to be versus setting cut scores as to where folks are, which is how we have done so with all of our status cut scores.
Amy, and then.
I just had a clarification question regarding LTELs and where they land in terms of districts. So if a student started in a school and was identified as an English learner in kindergarten. They go through 4th grade through one district, and then they come to you as a 5th grader in your district, still as an EL. They are now your LTEL, not the district's before? Or how does that work?
So we're looking at where students are, right? Well, as far as cumulative enrollment goes, the cohort goes, as far as where they test for assessments, right? We're only able to capture data about where students are per our enrollment, right, in CalPADS. And specifically, so any middle school that had LTEL students who then pass on to high school, be that in a unified school district or a elementary school district to a high school district, right? That status is with the student. And so therefore, that school has now a, Asian LTEL student who's also a socioeconomically disadvantaged student, right? All of those things come with the student, and you're enrolled in helping that student. So it's not really about I would say, creation of said student. It is about serving the needs of the students that you had in the school that current year.
And if we're looking in it that way, then the district that had the student before had all these years with them, but there's no indicator to even talk about that progress for that district. We're only talking about the district that gets them after that the 7-year mark.
They would be an English learner at that school district, right, for all of that time. So, I will be generic in that terms, right? But if they're not succeeding as an English learner, they would show that, across the dashboard, either in their in their performance through the different academic indicators. On the English learner progress indicator, they're not making it into the progress indicator to show, right, movement forward, and then moving it, forward otherwise.
I find this LTEL discussion really just fascinating. On the issue, the issue that was raised about where to set the cut scores, I understand that we're reacting to a previous regime that people didn't like, but we may be overreacting in the sense that, to the extent that NCLB set goals that were viewed as unachievable, 100% achievement, which is, seems wishful thinking, as you said, it doesn't mean the alternative is not necessarily, well, we should grade on a curve and meet people where they are. If people are, in fact, the majority of them are quite low and we're disappointed where that is. There are alternatives in between, which are to choose achievable goals that we can strive for and feel good about, that may expose the fact that we're not doing the kind of job that we want to do. Now, I understand this isn't where this is coming from statute. This is coming from the board. So I don't want to belabor the point, but I don't think that the only reaction to unachievable goals is to grade on a curve and simply say we're going to have very achievable goals now. I think there's a happy median, and we may have overcompensated. Did you want to respond to that, Cindy? I have another point I wanted to make. But
I think this is a healthy discussion that the board has taken into consideration time and time again when we've brought forward our accountability work plan. I think the other thing that Kim may have touched on, but I didn't hear it maybe as clearly, is one of the pieces of feedback around this particular indicator is that we should have higher goals because only so many are being identified for differentiated assistance. And we have not in this accountability system set our criteria like the former accountability system that we want a certain amount of districts in differentiated assistance, right? That's not the goal. Success is not having 400 districts in differentiated assistance. It's having the right districts and charter schools in differentiated assistance to get support based on the criteria. So we're not creating a system that is working backwards. We're doing it, each of these indicators have been set in a way that is consistent. And so I just want to make sure that you also have that context in mind as well, is that this is not the old AYP system that existed, this high bar.
it's definitely different. On the LTL front, one of the things, and this is less this is not specific to the dashboard, but more something that I want to make sure I understand in terms of LTL classification. So one of the important elements of reclassification is academic performance on the CAS score. And so one of the things that I realized in looking at my own district's data is that it was in fact very difficult to see academic performance improve on groups where students where once they started performing, they were often reclassified out of the group. So there was adverse selection into that group. This is also true of students with disabilities. Because if you do well in school, even if you might have a disability, you often get reclassified out. We saw this happen in my district because we did a big reading initiative. We saw a lot of success. And we actually reclassified a bunch of special education and EL kids out of their categories. As a result, the results in those categories for our reporting didn't improve. We didn't improve even though the students as a whole did improve. So I thought this was counterintuitive. And I'm wondering if the dashboard in any way takes that into effect, because you could in fact be doing a very good job with ELs, as I think they're sometimes called, but your LTELs would in fact not show great improvement because the students that were improving were no longer in the category.
So that's the reason that the academic indicator includes RFEPs for 4 years after they've been reclassified.
I'm sorry, how long after?
4 years. So that is the maximum allowable per ESSA. So that's where we're allowed to do that. And previously, the reason why is because we weren't allowed to keep RFEPs in there, and you were looking at simply English learner performance. So we're looking at consistent academic performance, a group of students on a test in English, in a language that we are admitting on the other side that they have not mastered, to be able to master that. So that is actually why we're so gifted through ESSA and per legislative efforts that were, I'd say, nonstop from the English learner community, to be able to include RFEPs, to be able to have those RFEPs that we spoke about before that are outperforming English-only students in many cases, be able to balance out that performance and seeing that there. So within the we do not want in any way, shape, or form accountability to hold back students from being reclassified. That was happening previously. And that is something that through inclusion of the RFEPs for 4 additional years, we do not want that right to happen. So for LTELs, these students would leave that group, right? But they would then join the EL, they'd stay in the EL group for another 4 years within the accountability system, which I hope by that time that means that they are graduated.
You hand. Todd, did you have another point? And then I want to hit Amy and Judy.
Just quick clarification. That's very helpful. But just to make sure I understood it right, you're saying they don't stay in the LTL group after they reclassify out.
They would no longer be an English learner.
But they do stay in the EL group for 4 years?
They would be in the EL group for an additional 4 years, yes.
Okay. So they're not in the one, but they are in the other for accountability purposes.
Yes.
That's excellent. Thank you.
Amy? Okay. Judy?
So my question goes back to when we think about the now 14 student groups. We know that students can be in more than one student group. So in terms of the LTELs, will they stay in the English learner group while they're in LTEL, or will they leave that group? Because I know, so just trying to get clarity there.
It's a very good question. And once we are able to see exactly who the long-term English learners are, right after we've made all of these lovely decisions here, we'll be able to look at the data and see exactly what the overlap is, right, ascribing certain populations. And I would imagine in a high school district with long-term English learners that doesn't have any immigrant populations moving in, that you're going to see a large overlap, right, between your English learner population as well as your long-term English learner population. It's not unique, as in our program student groups, right? You can be a foster student who automatically is an SED student, right? These are not unique, who's also an English learner, right? Those can all be obviously within our program student groups overlapping. But until, again, we have that data, we won't know exactly what that duplication looks like. I mean, it is important to figure out, obviously within the system of support for identification, we're not looking across multiple student groups, right? We're looking across one. So obviously, even while there may be duplication and perhaps a district is identified for support based on their English learners and their LTELs, it's not really a double support, right? Or anything down. It's just obviously maybe like, maybe it is the LTELs that's contributing to that. So, but we will definitely look at that to see what that looks like across the state and share if there's any insight in the following year.
Other questions on LTELs before we move into the CCI?
Not so much questions, but I did want to just applaud the continued spotlight on our LTELs. And just like when you mentioned with science about, for the state providing some resources for our schools and our staff, I think that'll definitely be necessary, because I think what we see along the state is a continued focus on doing good practices for ELs, but those same practices aren't being successful for our LTELs. So really providing that spotlight, some additional resources, and maybe just some communities of practice of what are those schools that are being successful with LTELs doing so that we can all replicate them.
Thank you.
All right. This shall be, I don't know how much, how good all of our memories are anymore, but this should be a very familiar presentation as far as the College Career Dashboard work goes for this year. I don't know what happened there. That's just some abdomens. The College Career Indicator measures how well districts and schools are preparing its graduates for both college and career. As a reminder, the students that are included within the CCI are the same set of students that are within our graduation rate indicator. So taking it back to that conversation we had earlier, right? This cohort discussion. And our graduation rate indicator combines both graduates who have succeeded in completing their requirements within 4 years, as well as those who have completed it within 5 years. So as you can see, right, you can see that it's the preparation of students from the class of 2022, as well as those who graduated from in their 5th year from the class of 2021. Just as a background on CCI, as Cindy mentioned it previously, but we had the first return of the College Career Indicator in 4 years to the dashboard this past year, and it was like a little bit of a reawakening. I think we've experienced previously with the LP when it came back to life in 2019 as status, and then this year for CCI as well. And I say that just because obviously we know there's been a large turnover in the field, right? A lot of new folks coming on board and understanding exactly what the matrix of possibilities are for the CCI, as well as how their districts and schools contribute to assisting their students in reaching levels that we see as prepared. So it showed up as status only this year, and then next year it will be back in full color, and the whole dashboard will just be beautiful colors all across the way, and we don't have to worry about, oh goodness, my daughter's principal, I don't want to say it, but I don't know what she called the status bars, but I was like, cell phone bars? Like she had never heard the term before, and I was like, what did you guys think they were? Those are gone, and we'll all be back to colors on the dashboard. So the CCI covers a lot of different dashboard principles. Specifically, the unique ones are about reporting opportunity and performance gaps through student groups, right? So especially opportunity gaps. You can't show up as prepared if your district is not providing opportunities for you to be prepared. And in other districts, we're seeing overwhelmingly high success in that area because obviously there isn't an opportunity gap there, right? To be able to avail students to be prepared. So that's a really important way to see, and a lot of distinction between the equity report there. Again, reporting on each indicator separately, valuing each indicator equally, back to our technical quality work, and then finally being subject to continuous revision and improvement. I'm actually going to skip to this slide real quick for the development of the CCI. So just to key in, the CCI was developed to emphasize that a high school diploma represents both the completion of a broad and rigorous course of study that prepares students for success after high school. Therefore, this is the key thing about the CCI. If you do not graduate from high school, you can't be prepared on the College Career Indicator. So if you have a school that only has 80% of its students graduating, the highest you could see on the CCI, right, would be 80% there. So just as a reflection, that's the first criterion of success within the College Career Indicator. It was originally adopted back in July of 2016, and then the performance levels and colors were reported for the first time on the 2018 dashboard. And it's based on students in each cohort and uses specific criteria that are reliant on both assessments as well as course completion data to determine if students are prepared, approaching prepared, or not prepared for college and career. The only metric that goes into actually the dashboard reporting, though, for our sake, is prepared. Approaching prepared provides some additional information, which you can find in our additional reports section, but it does not contribute in any way to a student, a school or district or student group score on the dashboard. That simply is a reflection of what prepared is. So for the 2024 Accountability Work Plan, this is our work around CCI. We're going to be seeking guidance from the State Board of Education on continuing to review the data that we reviewed last year. And I think there was a very robust conversation with our colleague Betty Mura, who presented that item back in August, which specifically, if you don't remember, is on internships, student-led enterprise, simulated work-based learning, and ASVAB, as well as updating the State Board on the data collection for the Seal of Civic Engagement, which will be happening this year for the very first time. And then discussing exploration of industry certifications and moving forward that work as well. Specifically with reviewing the data for the 4 new career measures, as I mentioned there, previously, we analyzed those 2 years of data, and I believe very vocally, everyone who was present, and I'm sure if the 4 new members had been here, you would have said it with them as well. But specifically, that the data that we collected during some COVID-attended years on opportunities for internships and student-led enterprise and simulated workplace learning had very little participation, right? And was not a robust data collection for us to be able to make any determinations for how to include that within the CCI. So therefore, you asked for us to look at another year of data. So that is what we're looking through forward. So if we are availed from the State Board, we will continue to work on that additional data. And then what additional guidance the board needs from the CDE to add these components to the CCI. That is the other critical question, is before moving forward, the board need to provide direction as to how these components would be included and added to the dashboard. As far as the Seal of Civic Engagement goes, the board not so long ago actually passed, right, this brand new state seal. I don't know if any of the folks here are that familiar with it because it operates within either your county, district, or schools. But it's an exciting opportunity for students in the state of California to display their knowledge of civic engagement and how they're contributing in that way. So we are adding an ad hoc data collection, which is how we currently gather our ASVAB data from LEAs. So it's not a direct input into CalPads. And for all of you guys who are like, it's okay. But for the CalPads folks, that they need to hear that, that it's not a checkbox in CalPads, but it's an ad hoc data collection where we'll be asking for the student identifiers for all of the students that meet that state seal. Presently, we award the seals throughout the state. And districts request, I'd like 50 seals, and we send them 50 seals. But we are not asking them, please send us the SSIDs of all of the students who have earned this, and then collecting that and adding that to our longitudinal data system. We don't have that. However, after this year, we'll finally have that information and be able to build out that data set and be able to reflect on where these students are earning the seal, how many of them are there, because sometimes districts ask for like 50 seals, but they actually only end up awarding 20 because they just want to make sure they've got enough to stick right on the diplomas. So that's kind of a not exactly the precise kind of count that we're looking for here in accountability. And so that information will be available to us following this end of year data collection. And then moving forward, we'll be able to look at that information for this year and the coming years and be able to see what we can do with that. And if the State Board would like to move forward with any inclusion of this seal within the criteria for the CCI. And then finally, industry certifications and looking to see how these could be incorporated. Presently, obviously, we have a very robust system of CTE pathways right throughout the state. CalPads, while we collect the course data around that, right, the external activities and programs that are incorporated with some of these pathways aren't exactly captured, right? So we know that through our internship collection and walking through, being able to know that this course and completion of this course also requires, right, the student to show up at an internship. We just see the course name, right, and the course grade. But we know that there's so much embedded into many of these CTE pathways that we do not collect data on, right, and that are not provided to CDE in any way. So we'll be continuing to do our work, and this is kind of a boots on the ground way of going through, but really being able to see what data we can collect, what's the best way to do so, and also making sure this isn't an age-limited criteria to collect, because in a lot of situations and circumstances, some of these opportunities for industry certifications are only available to those students who have turned 18. Right, and so we don't want to, kind of only award something to a group of folks. Again, some students gone all the way through the coursework, right, and they're just as qualified, but they're graduating at 17 and unavailable to get that industry certification under the guise of the district, right? But within over the summer, they're able to complete that work and get it. We don't want to create that, that false look, right, and be able to really truly capture what is going on within these CTE pathways a little bit better. So with that, I will go back to our little overall and ask if there's any questions.
Go ahead.
Thank you for this. This is such important work, and I think it's so important that explains why you had the picture of the abdomens, because it's core to everything. All right. I have a question and possibly a follow-up. And I also want to mention that the additional reports that you spoke to earlier, it's great data. I was able to dig in and get a sense of our local data. I noticed that we don't have it for the state, though, at least on the dashboard. I don't know, maybe it's accessible somewhere else. But my first question is, do we know statewide what measures in CCI the majority of students met to be college and career ready? Does that make sense?
State test scores.
Okay. So I think this is the feedback that I would offer is that, college and career readiness is so important, and we're meeting eligibility through standardized tests. And I wonder, is that an appropriate measure for determining whether or not students are ready for college or a career? And I think the advice that I would provide just from the CPAG is either in this work plan or another work plan or in some work plan that we create as a state a definition for college and career readiness so that we can align these indicators with how we define it.
Thank you. Other questions? Okay, Babatunde.
Yeah, thank you for that presentation, and I'd just like to echo what Roddy just shared. I think that it's critically important for us to really understand like a holistic view of what it means to be college and career. And right now, there's multiple ways, to your point, right, that students can get it. And if a majority of students are getting it just through standardized tests, it'd be interesting to have that clear definition. And I think that makes a lot of sense. And when we think about bridging the gap between K-12 and higher ed, it would be interesting to see from a post-secondary standpoint how students feel that have met it through that criteria, right? Do they really feel like they're ready for these higher educational and post-secondary experiences, having met or exceeded the standard on ELA or math or what have you? So I agree, yeah.
Okay, go ahead, Kim.
All right, I promise we're getting through this. All right, student level growth model data releases. I think this is, Cindy describes 2016, like all of our little markers. And this one for me is 2015. I started here in April of 2015, and I want to say I got work on these. Can you look into the growth model? I think on like May 15th of 2015. So as we eclipse a full decade of work on this, it's something that the work has taken a while, but that doesn't mean that it's not worthy of where it is right now. And I've said it before, but I will be presenting. So in April, I'll be going to Philadelphia to present at the National Conference of Measurement and Education, as I've previously done. I've done internationally as well as domestically, and talked about our work on the student growth model. And specifically, the last opportunity I had to do so was down in San Diego. And when we spoke to the issues that we encountered with our growth model and the mathematical calculations that we have done in order to make it a valid and reliable measure, folks in the audience's eyes were huge. The grandfather of the growth model, who essentially created the model that most of the country uses in Colorado, was our discussant, and he stood up to say how impressed he was and so happy he was that someone had fixed his problem. And so to be able to hear that and understand that we're spreading the message, number one, that the currently used and utilized growth models that exist in accountability systems may not be sharing the information that they're intended to, and that we feel like we have provided a valid and reliable fix to do so. It's incredibly honored work because, it was a hard day when we found out like this wasn't going to work for the state of California in 2018, but nobody gave up and everyone kept going, and it's truly a sign of continuous improvement and resilience that we're looking to be able to get, as specifically like Babatunde mentioned about that year over year, right? Same student and information. We're looking for that, and we want to know, right, where growth is really happening and accelerating, and what are you doing in those opportunities and those environments to do so. So I can speak very proudly that while we had a bunch of bumps in the roads, and obviously COVID didn't help at all, but with this year in December, we're going to release our first set of student growth data, and it'll be based on our CASP assessments from the 2021-22 year, 2022-23, as well as 2023-24. So therefore, the testing that's happening, the window that just opened up a few weeks ago. And then the release of these results is going to allow the State Board of Education to begin the conversations around how they would like to use this information. We do have a set of, sample test results that we released in 2019. It's how we developed the model, right? It was our working model. But information on what that looks like, and obviously the world of assessments and accountability that we're in right now, it's a different place in 2024. So we'll be able to, with the release of that information, have these conversations, I guess, in January, the next month. Maybe we should time CPAG, right? So that maybe you guys can see that data. And then how exactly, specifically, like as we spoke to with science, what are they looking to? Where would this be added to the accountability system if that's what they would like to do? Is it data that they'd like to share? Where does this fit in to accountability in the dashboard? And additionally, where does this fit in to support determinations for both our state and federal systems? Those are the principles that aligns with, and I know we're getting closer to lunch. So specifically, our work plan for this year is, one, to release this information in a downloadable data file with aggregated growth scores for the school, district, and student group levels. And that would be available for all of our student groups, including our LTELs, right? So that information would pop through in this year's downloadable files. And then additionally, we are looking to add a graphic display of the results on the details page of the dashboard. So that's the other place that we will be able to add that information. It will not be released with the dashboard on November 22nd, but it will be released when we do release the files by the end of the year. And with that, I will take any questions.
Amy?
I don't have a question, but I just want to say this is the most exciting thing that has been presented today. I know that we have talked in education so much about looking at kids and what they do compared to themselves. And that is something that we've struggled to be able to do. So thank you for this. This is wonderful.
Go ahead, Kim.
All right. And our last item, Priority 1 state level data. This is something else, refresh our memories in the cobwebs from August, that you all had a direct link to putting on the dashboard. For Priority 1 in 2023, the state board adopted, per your lovely recommendations as well, displaying information from the 2021-22 Teacher Assignment Monitoring Outcomes, or as we say, TAMO, which I know is another acronym out there. Sorry, we co-opted an acronym from someone, but it's Teacher Assignment Monitoring Outcomes, reports within your local measure Priority 1. So on your district or LEA dashboards, right, this is what appears on each of those for the dashboard. And then additionally, the state board, following that action, reflected the self-reflection tool to be able to, for all districts to be able to accurately subscribe and share what's going on. Previously, Priority 1 was a district submitted information. So you actually filled in what your teacher assignment monitoring outcomes were per your understanding. Now the teacher assignment monitoring outcomes is a long process that starts with Fall 2, the submission of that course data that then that comes to us, that we then share with the California Teacher Credentialing Office. CTC gets it. They evaluate against their records, right, for which teachers have which credential and can teach which courses against our course data, and then they send the data back to us to then publish and move forward. So that process takes a very long time. It is interagency. Some of you may not know that we are two completely separate agencies to be able to do that full data process and linking. So we are 1 year behind. However, now when you look and submit that priority of level 1 data, you're seeing the data that's going to be there, right? You know, and can attest to it as well. So this is how the data looked as it was published, and anybody can pull up the dashboard and see what it looks like for their LEA as well. And please note, remember, local indicators are not available on school web dashboards, right? They're only available on for districts and charter schools. And you were able to see the total teaching full-time equivalency, that number, and then the percentage of that number that represented clear credentials, as well as the comparison to the statewide average, if that was either above or below the statewide average. Additionally, there was an optional narrative box that LEAs were able to enter information prior to the publication of the dashboard on December 15th. And many LEAs took the opportunity to be able to explain what they saw within that data. And specifically, we all know that clear percent may not be representative of how we treat credentialing opportunities. And I think I just saw today, a brand new sort of, teacher apprenticeship program, right? Moving forward, where teachers without clear credentials will be, right, are being encouraged, and we're looking to develop programs throughout the state to encourage folks to get into the teaching field prior to their full clear credential being available. So districts that avail themselves of those opportunities and take pride in offering that opportunity, their clear percent may turn out to be below the statewide average, right? And while that, is something that they take pride in, one of their, members of their community might look at it and go, oh, what's going on? So this is your opportunity within that narrative box, and it's quite a generous limit of characters of 1,500 to be able to explain what the situation is within your district or charter school, and to be able to clarify what folks are seeing available to them. So moving forward, with the first reporting of this data in Priority 1, we're really starting to hear back from folks exactly what this data means to them, right? What it doesn't mean to them, and exactly, what technical and policy supports that CDE can offer for folks to be able to make sure that the data that is going in their Fall 2 submission, which is right around the window here for us, is correct and accurate with all of their course listings, so that when CTC evaluates that information, right, it is also matched up. When we did this data release, we were already 2 years into data collection. So if that makes sense, we've gone through 2 full data collections before folks were able to see this data. So this 3rd year of data, which will be released this year and hopefully in late spring, that information is the first set of data that we're going to have where folks actually could make changes and figure out if they were making mistakes on the data entry end. And as we all know, sometimes when you have data reflected back at you, you see, oh, I did not mean that. And that was the case for a lot of districts when they were entering their course data. The new course data information, that implementation, really took a hold and effect during COVID times. So as far as being able to enter all of that brand new course data, some folks just did it wrong, and that's okay. But unfortunately, because they did it wrong there, then it translated right in this information and mismatched information from what they knew to be true at their district. Like, we don't have 30% of clear teachers. We have a lot of clear teachers. They had just put in the wrong codes, right, for the wrong things, and it had not aligned. So that information will be available this year. So this year's dashboard, 2024, will be the first time we're really seeing, as we feel, right, some clean data where districts, again, have been able to go in and fix that. So for 2024, we are anticipating that we will continue to support and monitor the impact of this data, again, as this brand new refresh comes through. And then additionally, supporting the field's understanding around the other data that is linked to this course collection around Fall 2. So specifically, staff demographic experience, education data from multiple years, and this third year of the TAMO data. So that is what we're looking to assist with for Priority 1 in this year. Any questions?
Thank you. Go ahead, Kim.
All right. So next steps for the state board. Today you had your meeting, and then next month in March, we will be presenting this work plan and all of your comments and feedback that you've provided today as well to the state board and our presentation on the 2024 accountability work plan. And that item will be available in later this month.
Thank you so much. We are so lucky to have staff that have the historical knowledge of how our policy world has changed and evolved. I mean, to be able to hear Kim talk about 2015, to be able to hear Cindy talk about the different things that started in 2016. So just so appreciative of staff's historical knowledge, and also just all the different folks at CPAG who have been a part of this work, right? You all have been educators for such a long time, and I feel like that experience plus that perspective is just such a neat nexus in this room. So we'll transition to public comment. You can see the call-in number on the screen. Members of the public wishing to provide comment on this item may do so by calling the number on the slide. You'll be notified when it is your time to speak. We encourage you to please state your name and affiliation for the record. Please remember to turn down the speaker volume of your computers if you are following the live feed. Speakers will be limited to 1 minute each.
Hello, my name is Sally Fox, calling from San Diego County, where I'm a retired multilingual educator and current education policy analyst for the California Association for Bilingual Education. CABE would like to provide support for your advice on item 1, specifically on the need to disaggregate EL-only and RFEP students for the academic indicators to ensure meaningful information. As we know, disaggregated data are divided into detailed subcategories to help us notice effects on marginalized groups. An analysis by Californians Together of 2023 ELA results demonstrated this need. The aggregate identifies 255 districts in the red on the dashboard, whereas disaggregation reveals 427 districts in the reds. That's 67% more districts that would likely benefit from differentiated assistance to improve their EL programs. In the name of fairness and high expectations that are supported, CABE urges CPAG to advise the SBE to make this change for the 2024 dashboard. Thank you. And by the way, amazing, impressive presentation. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Connie Choi with Public Advocates on behalf of the LCFF Equity Coalition. I'd like to uplift a few points. When considering English learner progress, please disaggregate data to ensure separate consideration for various EL profiles, review cut scores for status, and incorporate principles of the EL roadmap into the system of support. as the state starts to track TK outcomes, collect and report on student group data across indicators. The CCI should integrate data capture of both college and career opportunities. Incorporation of student-level growth model data cannot wait, and we urge the state to start its work planning process now. And lastly, we urge CPAG to urge SPE to recalibrate the weight of the dashboard indicators to better capture academic outcomes and uplift overall accountability. Thank you for your consideration.
Good morning. My name is Ruth Barajas, and I'm a former teacher and school administrator, and I'm calling with Californians Together. I would like to comment today on the topic of identifying long-term English learners and the threshold specified for districts versus schools that would constitute a numerically significant subgroup. The language in the SB 141 says that if a district has 15 or more LTELs, then they are accountable. But today's presentation suggests that 30 LTELs for school accountability. While I want to believe that the lower number at the district level is intended to ensure that even when long-term English learners are spread out throughout a district and schools have lower numbers, that the districts will still need to be accountable. And that's good. But the different thresholds may lead to confusion. And schools that have less than 30 may conclude that they're not accountable, while they may be in a district that has 15 or more and with the accountable to address those needs in LCAP. Is it possible that schools may think that they might not have to implement what the district proposes? That's a concern. I do appreciate the explanation today, Andressa, that we cannot change the thresholds, but I suggest that we make sure that there is clarity in what it means to ensure that schools are accountable to address these needs. Thank you.
Good morning, CPAG members. Shelley Spiegel-Coleman with Californians Together. We urge you to recommend to the State Board the incorporation of the English Learner Roadmap policy as a part of the differentiated assistance process. Only 152 districts qualify for differentiated assistance based upon the EL performance, identifying only 23% of the state's districts. Of that number, only 28 districts qualify for DA based upon LP enrolling only 12,035 English learners, just 3% of the state's ELs. With these very low numbers for LP, we wonder if the methodology is designating the right districts. For DA districts based upon EL outcomes, we recommend the system of support incorporate the English Learner Roadmap as a framework for identifying the root cause and the plan for continuous improvement. We appreciate the department's work on so many aspects of the accountability system. Thank you very much.
Hi, this is Suzanne Cooey of the Charter Schools Development Center. Yes, thanks CDE for all the great information and the webinars you all put up. I know this has been a ton of work and I appreciate all that. One piece of information on the dashboard that would be awesome to have would be confidence intervals around the academic indicators. That would help to increase awareness and give more statistical soundness around the information on the dashboard. Second, and the larger point, is the importance of growth data. So excited for a growth model to come out. Really wondering how it will be operationalized. I think it's critical to understand that level and growth are different things. They depend on the purpose you use. You need to look at those components differently. If they're just mushed together into one metric, people don't have the ability to discern. Also hoping that with LP, that might also move toward a more pure growth metric rather than performance bands, which is a chunky, not statistically clean. That's
Good afternoon, caller with the phone number ending in 9687. Please state your name and affiliation for the record. Your time starts now. Good afternoon, caller with the phone number ending in 9260. Please state your name and affiliation for the record. Your time starts now.
Good afternoon, Angelica Salazar with Public Advocates. We are grateful to the department for resuming publication of teacher demographic data on DataQuest. We will soon be able to examine how much our educator workforce reflects the demographics of our students, which informs efforts to grow a more diverse educator pipeline. With these recent changes to the changes to Priority 1 Dashboard Teacher Indicator, this is the first year since LCFF was instituted that data sources can truly support authentic local conversations on how to address teacher shortages. We have two recommendations to further strengthen the local dashboard teacher indicator for future consideration. One, report this local indicator on the school pages of the dashboard because we have reliable and available school-level data in the TAMO dataset. And two, develop an equity component showing the extent of any disparities across the school sites within school districts. Both of these elements are called for in Ed Code Section 52064.5, and we will continue working with the department to collaboratively develop a pathway forward and foster greater equity and access to fully prepared and properly assigned teachers.
Thank you. Good afternoon, caller.
Hello, this is Patty.
Good afternoon, caller with the.
Oh, hi.
Go ahead.
Sorry. It's almost lunchtime, everyone. Hi, Patty Chavez from Sobrato Early Academic Language Seal. I appreciate your time and all your dedication here. Thank you for the wonderful presentations. I'm here today as a partner and member of Californians Together, and we'd like to provide feedback on item 1 with the goal of continuing to improve California's accountability to meet the needs of our English learners and our multilingual students, and also to support California's commitment to Global 2030 and EL Roadmap. I'd like to uplift the need for LP to set equity-focused goals. Only 60 districts received a red rating on the LP this year. That is very close to just one district per county. What is more concerning is that these 60 districts only enroll 30,000, a little over 30,000 ELs. That means just 3% of the state ELs. At the November State Board Ed meeting, board members suggested that a session made for future time to review the issue of the LP accountability. Now that the LP is complete, we suggest that a session could be scheduled to review the cut scores for the status that creates very low level of
Thank you, caller.
expectation and aspiration. Thank you so much for your consideration.
Good afternoon, caller with the phone number ending in 8256. Please state your name and affiliation for the record. Your time starts now.
Hello, this is Robert Manwaring from Children Now. I want to thank the department for all their hard work in moving forward on these multiple fronts. Building on comments of my other colleagues in the Equity Coalition on the teacher indicator, I agree with Public Advocates' recommendation of moving this data to the school level. It would also be great if the data could be categorized in more than 2 categories. Right now, it's just above the state average and below the state average. I think we could provide a more nuanced understanding of that data for our users. On the growth model, I've been working on this issue since 1999 in the Public Schools Accountability Act. We're one of 2 states in the country who don't have an active growth model used for their accountability system. We need to start the work now on incorporating the growth model into the dashboard. And finally, on the English Learner Progress Indicator, similar to CalTOG and CABE, we believe that the standards of this indicator need to be raised. We would note that for both, as an example, the math indicator and the graduation
Thank you, caller.
rate indicator.
Good afternoon, caller with the phone number ending in 4301. Please state your name and affiliation for the record. Your time starts now.
Good morning. This is Lindsay Tornatore calling on behalf of the California County Superintendent, and we are calling to broadly support the CDE's 2024 Accountability Work Plan. We would like to emphasize our excitement and appreciation for the multi-year process that CDE is proposing to include science on the dashboard. We applaud the CDE's proposed systematic approach and very appreciative for the CDE's outreach to county offices, specifically through our statewide science committee that will include the perspective of our practitioners along the way of making decisions. Also, on behalf of the county superintendents and county offices, I would like to echo the comments of Vice Chair Flores during the discussion about differentiated assistance. It is true, LEAs do not wait for color on the dashboard to continuously improve their systems. Our statewide system of support is designed to provide ongoing, universal support to all LEAs in all content areas to address the unique needs of all of our students in California towards a more equitable and accessible educational system. We appreciate the dedication and time that the CPAG members provide to assist our
Thank you, caller.
partners. Thank you.
There's no more calls.
See no public comment in the room. I will close public comment. Thank you, everyone who called in and those who submitted letters. We'll now, are there any last comments from CPAG on this item? Great. Thank you so much. Thank you, CDE staff, for giving us those points throughout the item to be able to share our comments and feedback. I thought that was really helpful to kind of thread our thoughts throughout. We'll now take up item 3, which is general public comment. Public comment is invited on any matter not included on the printed agenda. You'll see the phone number and the participant access code on the screen. Remember to turn down the volume of your computer or live webcast to avoid background echoes. And again, we encourage you to state your name and affiliation for the record. Speakers will be limited to 1 minute each. We'll give folks a second to call in. I mean, item 1 was so big. Are there really any other topics?
We have no comments.
See no one in the room. I will conclude public agenda item number 3, which is public comment. This concludes the February 2024 meeting of the California Practitioners Advisory Group. Thank you, everyone, for being here today. I'm excited to see you in June, and I will adjourn today's meeting today at 12:10.